Tonight we're uncovering the weirdest mythical Pokémon mysteries. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine standing in a playground in 1998. There is no high-speed internet, no social media, and no official strategy guide in your backpack. There is only a rumor, a story passed from person to person about a pink, cat-like creature hidden beneath a lone, rusted truck in a harbour. You spend hours trying to push that truck. You try every combination of buttons. You fail, yet the mystery only grows. This was our first introduction to the concept of a mythical Pokémon, a category of creature that exists on the razor's edge between reality and urban legend. For decades, these entities have occupied a space that ordinary legendary Pokémon simply cannot touch. While a legendary Pokémon might be a guardian of a mountain or a master of the sea that you can find through normal exploration, a mythical Pokémon is something else entirely. They are the ghosts in the machine. They are the phantoms that only appear when the stars align, or more accurately, when a special real-world event grants you access to a secret that isn't even written into the base code of the game's standard narrative. They are the ultimate what-if made flesh, and their origins are often far darker and more complex than the colourful exterior of the Pokémon world would suggest. The stakes of understanding these creatures go far beyond just completing a Pokédex. To understand the mythicals is to understand the very fabric of the Pokémon universe's cosmology. We are talking about the literal architects of time, space, and existence. We are talking about beings that represent the collective unconscious of humanity, the spirits of the forest, and the manifestations of our deepest fears. When you look at a Pokémon like Arceus, you aren't just looking at a powerful monster. You are looking at a creator deity that emerged from a void of nothingness to shape everything we see. But why does a franchise aimed at all ages choose to ground its most elusive creatures in such heavy, often unsettling folklore? Why is it that the rarer a Pokémon is, the more likely it is to be tied to a haunting Japanese ghost story or an ancient ritual involving the dead? There is a profound tension here. On one hand, these are symbols of wonder and the joy of discovery. On the other hand, they are often rooted in the macabre, drawing from centuries of human mythology to create designs that feel ancient, alien, and sometimes deeply wrong. As we go deeper into these mysteries, we have to ask ourselves, what was the developer's true intention? Was Mew truly just a last-minute addition that accidentally sparked the greatest mystery in gaming history? Or was there always a plan to keep us guessing? The mystery of the mythicals is a rabbit hole that leads from the glitchy back alleys of the Kanto region to the literal edge of the universe in the Sinnoh region. It involves creatures that can manipulate your dreams, monsters that wear the skins of their victims, and entities that exist in dimensions of pure light and shadow. We are looking for the truth behind the cryptid quality of these monsters. In the Pokémon world, most people don't even believe these creatures exist. To the average citizen of Vermilion City or Jubilife Village, Arceus or Celebi are just fairy tales told to children. They are the Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster of their world. But we know better. We have seen the sprites. We have read the hidden Pokédex entries that speak of soul stealing and the birth of galaxies. Tonight, we are going to bridge the gap between the playground rumors of the 90s and the sophisticated, mythological world-building of the modern era. We will explore how a single hidden character changed the way we think about digital secrets forever. We will examine the real-world folklore that gave birth to these designs, from the one-eyed spirits of Japan to the celestial deities of ancient civilizations. We will deconstruct the creature origin mysteries that make us question what a Pokémon even is, and we will face the haunting, soul-based myths that turn a simple game into a psychological journey. This is not just a list of rare monsters. This is a journey into the heart of the Pokémon world's most enduring enigmas. We are looking for the why behind the weird. We are looking for the reason why, even 25 years later, we are still looking under the truck, hoping to find something that defies explanation. The journey begins at the intersection of myth and reality, where the rarest beings in the world wait for those who are willing to look into the shadows and ask what is truly hiding there. The deeper we go, the more we realize that the distinction between a legendary and a mythical is not just a marketing term, It is a fundamental difference in how these beings interact with the world. A legendary Pokémon is a force of nature, but a mythical Pokémon is a secret of the universe. They represent the things that shouldn't be possible. They are the glitches that became gods. Throughout this exploration, we will see how the developers used these creatures to touch on themes of death, rebirth, and the very nature of light and darkness. We will see how a simple bell or a bronze mirror can become a vessel for an ancient power, and how a forest spirit can become a protector of time itself. The lore of the mythicals is a tapestry woven from the threads of our own history, repurposed to fit into a world of pocket monsters. It is a world where the creator of all things can be captured in a small red and white ball, yet its true power remains forever out of reach, shrouded in the fog of myth. So settle in, let the world outside fade away. We are going back to the beginning, to the rumors, the myths, and the strange truths that define the most mysterious corner of the Pokémon universe. There is a ghost in the machine, a creature that exists not in the cartridge you hold in your hands, but in the space between rumor and code. In 1996, when Pokémon Red and Green first appeared in Japan, the Pokédex listed 151 species, but players quickly discovered something strange. A slot that could never be filled through normal gameplay. That empty space was not a programming error, it was a door, and behind that door lived a creature so elusive that for years, even the company that created it seemed reluctant to admit it was real. That creature was Mew, and it became the prototype for an entire category of Pokémon that the West would not fully understand for nearly 2 decades. The distinction between mythical and legendary Pokémon is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the franchise, and it was deliberately hidden from Western players for decades. In the original Japanese games, the line was always present. Legendary Pokémon were powerful, rare, and often woven into the story of the region. You could encounter them in a cave, battle them, catch them. They were part of the game world. Mythical Pokémon, on the other hand, were never meant to be found. They were not hidden in a secret room or waiting at the end of a side quest. They existed entirely outside the intended gameplay loop, accessible only through promotional events, movie ticket giveaways, or store distributions. In the West, however, localizers initially grouped Mew and later Celebi under the same legendary umbrella, erasing the distinction. The English Pokédex of Generation 1 simply labelled Mew as a rare Pokémon, and the term mythical did not appear in official materials until Generation 5, when the games began listing a separate category for event-exclusive creatures. For years, Western players were given no official language to describe what made Mew different from Mewtwo, and that silence created a vacuum. When the company does not name something, the fans will name it themselves, and they did. The event-only distribution model turned digital data into modern-day urban legends. Think about what that meant in the late 90s. You could not download Mew from the internet. You could not trade for it with a friend, unless that friend had attended a specific contest or visited a particular store in Japan. The creature was a piece of data that existed in the game code, but the only way to unlock it was to prove you were physically present at a real-world event. That made Mew a kind of digital artifact, an object that could be possessed only by those who had been in the right place at the right time. And because those events were so limited, most players never saw a Mew in person. They heard stories, they saw screenshots in magazines. They might have glimpsed one in a trade lobby if they were lucky. But for the vast majority, Mew remained a legend whispered in playgrounds, a creature that might as well have been a ghost, and that was exactly what made it so powerful. The rarity was not a bug, it was a feature. By making Mew almost impossible to obtain, Nintendo created a mythology that no amount of in-game lore could replicate. The data itself became the story. The psychological impact of the empty slot in the Pokédex cannot be overstated. In Generation 1, the Pokédex displayed all 151 Pokémon in a grid. If you had completed the regional dex, you would see 150 filled slots, but Mew was number 151. That meant there was an empty square at the bottom of the screen. A void that your eyes would fall upon every time you opened the menu. It was an implicit promise. There is something more. For a generation of children in the 90s, that empty space became an obsession. It was the catalyst for every rumour, every false strategy, every whispered secret. The truck near the SS. Anne became famous because players needed to believe there was a way to fill that void. The myth of a secret cave or a hidden button sequence existed because the empty slot demanded an explanation. The brain does not tolerate a vacuum. When you see an unfinished pattern, you will invent a solution. And that is exactly what happened. The empty slot in the Pokédex fueled a decade of playground rumors. Not because the game was broken, but because it was designed to leave a question unanswered. That question became the foundation of Pokémon mystery culture, and that culture persists to this day. When you look at the most famous mythical Pokémon, from Mew to Celebi to Jirachi, each one carries the same ghostly quality. They are not just rare, they are doubted. In the lore of the games, ordinary people within the Pokémon world often question whether these creatures even exist. That is not an accident. The designers intentionally built a layer of ambiguity into these Pokémon, a sense that they belong more to myth than to reality. And because the distinction between mythical and legendary was hidden from Western players for so long, that ambiguity deepened. We did not have the vocabulary to separate the gods of the world from the ghosts of the code. So we treated them all as legends, equally unknowable. But the truth is that mythical Pokémon occupy a unique space. They are the Pokémon that the games themselves treat as rumors. They are the monsters that the developers hid, not in a cave, but in the very architecture of the distribution system. They are the ghosts that live in the machine. In the next chapter, we are going to pull back the curtain on the most famous ghost of all. We are going to talk about the truck, the glitch, and the god. Because the story of Mew does not end with a hidden slot. It ends with a vehicle that never moves, a glitch that rewrote reality, and a deity that was never meant to be caught. The truck is waiting, and so is the truth. We ended the last chapter standing at the edge of a distinction that would define Pokémon for decades. The line between a legendary and a mythical. But that line wasn't drawn on paper in some Game Freak design meeting. It was carved into the collective imagination of millions of children by a single tiny pink creature. A creature that, according to rumor, could be found under a truck. And that rumor, more than any official announcement, is what turned Pokémon from a niche Game Boy curiosity into a global phenomenon. Let's talk about the truck. The SS Anne docks at Vermilion City, and if you are fast enough or patient enough, you can get the ship's captain to teach your Pokémon cut before the vessel sails away. But once it leaves, that's it. The dock is empty. Except if you stand at the very end of the pier, you see one thing that shouldn't be there. A truck. A single pixelated truck parked at the edge of the water. It does nothing. You can't interact with it, but it's there. And to a generation of kids who had already learned that Pokémon games were full of secrets. Missing No, the ghost in Lavender Town, the Poke Doll trick, that truck felt like a locked door. A door you just needed the right key for. The key, according to playground lore, was Mew, the rarest Pokémon of all. You were supposed to use strength to push the truck aside, and underneath, Mew would be waiting. Of course, it never worked. Mew wasn't under the truck. But the persistence of that myth reveals something deeper about how we interact with these games. The truck was a deliberate detail, a piece of set dressing that served no purpose. In a world built entirely from code, anything that exists for no reason becomes a puzzle, and the puzzle demands a solution. Mew became that solution, because Mew was already the ultimate mystery. But the real story of Mew is far more interesting than any fan myth. It starts in the final frantic weeks of development for Pokémon Red and Green in Japan. Satoshi Tajiri had already turned in the game, but one of the programmers, Shigeki Morimoto, had a hunch. He knew that the game's code was almost at its limit. The cartridge was so full that they had to strip out entire features. But Morimoto wanted one more thing. He wanted a secret. A Pokémon that nobody knew about, that would only exist as a whisper. So in a last-ditch effort, he managed to squeeze in Mew by using all the remaining space. The catch? Mew wasn't meant to be encountered through normal gameplay. There was no encounter script, no wild Mew data. It was simply present in the game's memory, a ghost. When Red and Green hit stores, word spread fast. How could it not? The game's Pokédex listed 151 Pokémon, but players could only catch 150. That missing slot was a vacuum, and rumor rushed to fill it. Kids took apart the game with glitches, save-state corruption, and endless experimentation. They discovered that by exploiting a battle glitch with a specific NPC, you could warp to an island where Mew appeared. Some called it a cheat, others called it a legend. But Game Freak saw something else: engagement. The Mew phenomenon became a marketing lifeline. In the early days of Pokémon, Sales in Japan were strong but not explosive. The franchise was still a risk. Then the official promotions began. Nintendo held contests where winners could have their game cartridges mailed in to receive Mew via a special distribution device. They sent Mew to movie theater audiences. They turned the missing Pokémon into an event. This wasn't just a ploy to sell more copies. It was a recognition that the mystery itself had power. People didn't just want to play Pokémon. They wanted to belong to a secret that was just out of reach. And that's the blueprint. Every subsequent mythical, from Celebi in the Yoto games to the shiny event Pokémon of later generations, owes its existence to that tiny, last-minute addition. The myth under the truck was never real, but it taught us all something. It taught us that the most compelling Pokémon aren't the ones you catch. They're the ones you chase. But not all secrets are hidden in game code or under a dock. Some secrets are buried in the oldest myths of all. In the next chapter, we move from a glitch god to a creator god. We'll follow the trail from the pink cipher under the truck to the being who, according to legend, emerged from an egg before the universe began. A being whose name means the first, a being called Arceus and the very first Deicide. The previous chapter ended with Mew, a glitch, a rumour, a last-minute addition that almost broke the game. That single creature taught us something crucial about Pokémon's hidden architecture. It proved that what you can't catch in normal play might be more important than anything in the Pokédex. And it set a pattern that would culminate in a mystery so profound that the developers themselves sealed it away. Not because of a bug, because of what it would reveal. There is one Pokémon that stands above all others, even above Mew. It is called the Original One, a being described in the oldest texts as having emerged from an egg in a void of nothing, and then shaping the world with its 1,000 arms. This is Arceus, and the implications of a Pokémon creating the universe are far more unsettling than any urban legend about a truck. Let's unpack what creating the universe actually means in Pokémon cosmology. The games tell us Arceus was born before the universe existed. It then created the trio of Dialga, Palkia and Giratina to govern time, space and antimatter. Later it created the Lake Guardians Uxie, Mesprit, and a Zelf to give beings knowledge, emotion and willpower. So Arceus is not just a powerful monster, it is the first cause, the unmoved mover. The entire world of Pokémon, every region, every battle, every trainer, exists because one creature decided to exist first. That is a staggering thought, and it becomes even stranger when you consider that this being can be caught with a simple Pokeball and traded over fee. But the real mystery here is not the theology, it's the method. How do you even meet Arceus in the games? The answer lies in an item that was never officially released, the Azure Flute. The Azure Flute is arguably the most legendary item in Pokémon history. It was programmed into Pokémon Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, and it was meant to be distributed at a special event. Players would receive the flute, then take it to the peak of Mount Coronet, play it, and a staircase would appear, leading to the Hall of Origin where Arceus awaited. That event never happened. The item was never distributed, and for years players hacked the game just to see what was up there. Why was it withheld? The official reason was that the developers felt the event wasn't polished enough, or that the experience of capturing a deity should remain exclusive. But the fan theories are darker. Some say the event was cancelled because it would have broken the game's narrative. If you catch Arceus before you have context for its role in creation, the mystery of the Sinnoh region collapses. Others think the event was too powerful, that seeing the Hall of Origin and the birth of the universe would have made the Pokémon world feel too small. Better to leave Arceus as a myth you can only access through glitches. But the Azure Flute is not the end of the story. In Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, a different event was actually implemented. And this one is far stranger. This is the Sinjoh Ruins event. If you own a copy of Diamond, Pearl or Platinum, with an Arceus on your save file, either from a hacked event or from a special 2009 distribution in Japan, you can take that Arceus to the ruins of Alph in Yoto. The scientist leads you to a new location, the Sinjoh Ruins. There, Arceus appears in its full glory, and a cinematic begins that is unlike anything else in the main series. The screen goes black. Then, a white egg appears. The egg pulses. From it, 3 smaller eggs emerge, one blue, one pink, one silver. These are the eggs of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. Arceus does not fight you. It simply witnesses the birth of the gods of time and space. And then you are given a choice to take one of the 3 newly hatched Pokémon. This cinematic is unsettling for several reasons. First, it is completely silent. No music, no sound effects. Just the visual of a divine being laying the building blocks of reality. Second, it reframes Arceus not as a warrior but as a parent. A creator so detached that it lets you, a human, pick up one of its children and walk away. The implication is that Arceus does not care about possession. It only cares about existence, and it trusts you to carry that existence forward. But what about the egg itself? The giant white egg from which the 3 eggs came. In the lore, Arceus itself hatched from an egg in the void. So the Sinjo Ruins event shows Arceus replicating its own genesis. It is creating time, space, and antimatter in exactly the same way it was created. That means the universe of Pokémon is not a one-time event. It is a cycle. Arceus can do it again and again. That leads to a terrifying question. What happens when a creator deity decides to create a new universe? What happens to the old one? The answer might be hidden in the name of a Pokémon that was later introduced. A Pokémon that is said to have 1,000 arms reaching out from its body. That Pokémon is the subject of our next chapter, and its connection to Arceus is not just a reference, is a warning. We ended the last chapter with the Azure Flute, a relic that was programmed into the game files of Diamond and Pearl, but never officially given to players. A key to the Hall of Origin, where Arceus awaited. The fact that the flute remained unreleased for over a decade, only to finally become obtainable in the Generation 4 remakes, only deepens the mystery. Why would Game Freak hide the god of their universe behind a real-world event that never happened? The answer might be simpler than we think, but it leads us to a much stranger question. What exactly is Arceus? Let's look at the Pokédex entry from Pokémon Diamond. It says, it is described in mythology as the Pokémon that shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. 1,000 arms, that number is very specific and it is not a casual exaggeration. For years, fans have tried to interpret what those arms actually are. Some assume it's a poetic way of describing Arceus's power, that it can create anything, like having 1,000 hands at its disposal. But the entry is literal. It says 1,000 arms, not the power of 1,000 arms. This forces us to ask, does Arceus physically have 1,000 limbs? And if so, why does the Arceus we catch in the games have only 4 legs, a torso, a head, and a ring around its body, not 1,000 arms? This is where the connections to real-world mythology become crucial. In Buddhism, there is a bodhisattva named Avalokiteshvara, known in Japan as Kannon. Avalokiteshvara is the bodhisattva of compassion, often depicted with multiple arms, sometimes 4, sometimes 6, but most famously with 11 heads and 1,000 arms. The 1,000-armed form, known as Sahasrabhuja, is a symbol of the deity's ability to reach out and help all beings simultaneously. Each hand holds a different implement or eye, representing infinite compassion and awareness. The resemblance to Arceus's mythology is striking. 1,000 arms used to shape the universe sounds like a divine creator figure, with an almost overwhelming capacity for action. But here's the twist. In Buddhist iconography, the 1,000-armed form is not the deity's true form. It is a manifestation, a visual representation of an abstract quality. The real Avalokiteshvara is a transcendent being beyond physical form. The 1,000 arms are a metaphor made literal for the sake of human understanding. Now apply that to Arceus. If Arceus is indeed inspired by Avalokiteshvara, then the Arceus we encounter in the games, the white equine creature that emerges from an egg, might not be the true Arceus at all. It could be an avatar, a physical shell that our limited perception can comprehend. The real Arceus, the one with 1,000 arms, would be something far more alien, something that exists outside of space and time, shaping the universe with limbs that are not really limbs, but extensions of a cosmic will. This theory gains traction when you consider the events of Pokémon Legends. In that game, you are transported to the past and eventually stand before Arceus itself, but you never see its full form. The Arceus you battle and capture is still the same 4-legged creature. The game implies that you are merely interacting with a fragment of the original being. In fact, the game's story heavily suggests that Arceus chose to appear to you in a form you could understand. The real Arceus, the one with 1,000 arms, remains beyond the veil. Think about the implications. If the Arceus we know is just an avatar, then what we call the original one is actually an incomprehensible entity that exists in a higher dimension. Pokédex entries from later generations describe Arceus as being born from an egg in a place where there was nothing, and that it then shaped the world. but the Diamond Dust event from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where Arceus triggers the creation of a new egg, suggests that Arceus can create other Arceus-like beings. Is that avatar itself capable of further creation, or is it simply a tool of the true thousand-armed creator? The notion of a physical avatar for a cosmic god is not unique to Pokémon. In Hinduism, Vishnu descends to Earth in avatars like Rama and Krishna. In Gnostic traditions, the supreme god is often unknowable and sends a lesser emanation to interact with the material world. Arceus fits this pattern perfectly. The Arceus we can battle, trade and store in a PC box is not the real Arceus. It is the mask, the part of the god that is willing to be understood. The real Arceus, with its 1,000 arms, the silent force that writes the laws of physics and lets the universe unfold. This interpretation also explains why the Azure Flute was never given out. Perhaps the Pokémon Company realized that allowing players to directly encounter and catch the avatar of their own creator god might trivialize the entity. They held back the flute because meeting Arceus was never meant to be a simple event. It was meant to be a legend, a myth that could be talked about but never fully proven. In the same way that Avalokiteshvara's 1,000 arms are a devotional image rather than a physical reality, the Arceus we read about in the Pokédex is a glimpse of something greater, filtered through a lens we can barely comprehend. So, what does this mean for the world of Pokémon? It means that the universe of these games is far deeper than we usually give it credit for. There is a hierarchy of beings, and at the top sits an entity that cannot be fully contained by a game cartridge. The Arceus we know is a doorway, not the destination. And if that is true, then what other myths are hiding in plain sight? What about the Forest Guardian, who can time travel, whose tears are said to have healing powers, and whose shrine holds a secret that the games have never fully revealed? That story begins with a single forest, a lost child, and a shadow that moves when no one is looking. The concept of 1,000 arms reaching out to shape reality is a staggering image, but it also raises a quieter question. What about the smaller, more intimate threads of time itself? In the mythology of the Pokémon world, not every legend speaks of cosmic beginnings. Some legends speak of forest sanctuaries, of shrines hidden under ancient canopies, and of a creature whose touch can bend the seasons. Celebi, the voice of the forest, is one of those legends, and like the 1,000 arms of Arceus, its story is layered with meaning that stretches far beyond the confines of a Pokédex entry. Celebi is often presented as a gentle time traveler, a guardian of forests who flits between eras to protect the balance of nature. But if you look closely at the lore surrounding it, especially in the Johto region, you find a much darker narrative buried just beneath the surface. It begins with a physical object that has become one of the most infamous dead ends in Pokémon history, the GS Ball. For some of you, the name might spark a distant memory of the anime. The GS Ball was a mysterious golden Pokeball with blue and red markings introduced in the Johto saga. Ash Ketchum carried it for dozens of episodes, tasked with delivering it to a man named Kurt in Azalea Town. Kurt, a master Pokeball craftsman, could not open it. The ball was then taken to Ilex Forest, to a shrine surrounded by ancient trees. There, the Pokémon Celebi was supposed to appear, but it never did. In the anime, the GS Ball was eventually abandoned. The storyline quietly dropped. It remains one of the greatest unresolved mysteries in the franchise. But the GS Ball did not disappear entirely. In the games, it took on an even stranger life. For years, players were convinced that it held the key to obtaining Celebi legitimately. In the Japanese versions of Pokémon Gold and Silver, an event distributed the GS Ball as an in-game item. When taken to the Ilex Forest Shrine, it triggered a battle with a wild Celebi. That event, however, was never released outside of Japan. The item sat in the game's code, a ghost in the machine. No official distribution ever unlocked it for Western players. The GS Ball became a literal dead end in the game files, a prop from the anime turned into a digital relic that players could never fully activate. Why did this happen? The answer lies in how tightly Celebi's lore is woven into real-world Japanese spirituality. Celebi is not just a cute fairy-like time traveler. It is a direct reference to the Kodama, tree spirits from Shinto belief. In traditional folklore, Kodama are the souls of ancient trees, often depicted as small, ghostly beings who protect the forest. Cutting down a tree inhabited by a Kodama is said to bring terrible curses. They are guardians of a delicate balance between the human world and the spirit world. And in Shinto, time is not linear in the same way it is in Western thought. The forest itself exists outside of time. A shrine dedicated to a Kodama is a place where past, present, and future can brush against each other. The Ilex Forest Shrine in the games is exactly that kind of place. It is a small, weathered stone altar surrounded by towering oaks. In the Japanese versions, when you present the GS Ball, Celebi appears as if summoned from another era. The shrine acts as a gateway through time, but the lore around it hints at something far more unsettling than a simple woodland spirit. In the Generation 2 games, Ilex Forest is said to be haunted. The Pokédex entries for several Pokémon found there describe eerie phenomena. Hoothoot's call is said to mark the passage of time, but also to signal something unnatural. The forest itself is a place where the boundaries between worlds are thin. Consider the dark timeline implied by this shrine. If Celebi can move freely through time, then the shrine is not just a portal. It is a wound in the fabric of reality. It is a place where you might meet a Celebi that has already seen the forest burned, or one that will see it burned again. The shrine does not discriminate. It opens pathways to every possible version of that forest, and that includes versions where the Kodama have been driven to despair. There is a reason why, in the lore of the games, Celebi is rarely seen and never fully understood. It is not merely a Pokémon that travels through time. It is a being that witnesses the entire history of its forest, from the first seed to the last ash. This is where the mystery of the GS Ball deepens. The ball itself may not have been a container at all. In Shinto tradition, sacred objects are often used to anchor a spirit, to give it a physical place to reside. The GS Ball might have been intended as a vessel, a kind of tamagotchi, a branch or object used in rituals to call spirits. But because the event never reached the West, the ball remained an enigma. Players dug through game code, searched for glitches, and crafted elaborate theories. Some believed it was meant to catch Celebi. Others thought it would unlock a hidden time travel mechanic. The truth, as it often is with mythical Pokémon, is that the GS Ball was never meant to be a gameplay feature. It was a narrative prop, a physical embodiment of a legend that only exists if you believe in it, and yet the legend persists. The Ilex Forest Shrine remains in the games, a silent invitation. Players still ask, what if? What if the GS Ball had been distributed? What if Celebi could have been caught without an event? The shrine stands as a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt. The forest knows. The Kodama know. But if the forest holds secrets, so too do the stars. There is another mythical Pokémon, one that sleeps at the center of a comet, and whose awakening comes at a great cost. The next time we meet, we will explore the legend of Jirachi and the price of a wish. We found Celebi asleep in the forest, suspended between life and legend, and now we must ask what happens when a mythical creature is not merely dormant, but bound to the slow rhythm of a celestial calendar. There is a Pokémon that does not hide in a shrine or a time warp. It waits inside a comet, orbiting the Earth for 1,000 years. When it awakens, it grants wishes, but the price of that wish is written into its biology, and the truth of its slumber is far stranger than any festival tale. Jirachi is known as the Wishmaker, and its arrival is tied to the appearance of the Millennium Comet, a celestial body that streaks across the sky once every 1,000 years. This is not a random astronomical event. The comet and the Pokémon are one. Jirachi sleeps inside a crystalline cocoon, a kind of suspended animation that lasts for centuries, and when the comet passes close enough to Earth, the cocoon opens, and Jirachi stirs for exactly 7 days. 7 days to grant wishes, 7 days to be awake. And then the comet carries it back into the darkness of space for another millennium. The folklore of the 1,000-year comet is not unique to Pokémon. It echoes the ancient Chinese and Japanese traditions of comets as omens, but more specifically, Jirachi's story is woven into the fabric of the Tanabata festival. Tanabata celebrates the once-a-year meeting of two star-crossed lovers, Orihime and Hikaboshi, separated by the Milky Way. On the 7th day of the 7th month, they are allowed to cross the bridge of magpies and reunite. In Pokémon, Jirachi's 7-day awakening mirrors that single night of connection. The festival involves writing wishes on strips of paper and hanging them on bamboo branches, a ritual that Jirachi himself seems to embody. In Japan, special Tanabata events have distributed Jirachi to players, tying the mythical distribution directly to the real-world tradition of wish-making. But here is where the folklore takes a sharp turn into the unsettling. Jirachi's Pokédex entries, particularly from the Ruby and Sapphire era, describe a creature that can grant any wish while it is awake. The catch is that Jirachi itself is not in control. The wishes are written on the tags attached to its head, and when a wish is made, the energy is channeled through Jirachi's body. That body, however, is not a simple vessel. The third eye on Jirachi's stomach is described as its true eye, and it remains closed during its 1,000-year sleep. When the eye opens, it signals that Jirachi is awake and ready to grant wishes. But the biological horror of the true eye is that it does not merely see, it reveals. In some interpretations, the true eye can see the true nature of a wish, the hidden cost, the selfishness beneath the surface. And when Jirachi grants a wish, it does so without judgment. But the consequences can be catastrophic. Consider the lore from the Pokémon Adventures manga, where Jirachi is awakened by a team of villains who force it to grant a wish for world domination. The wish is twisted, and Jirachi's power becomes a weapon. This is the price of a wish. Jirachi does not discriminate between good and evil. It is a neutral force, a cosmic vending machine that dispenses miracles without moral filter. The unsettling truth is that during its millennium of slumber, Jirachi is not resting peacefully. It is dreaming. And what does a wish granter dream about? Perhaps it dreams of all the wishes it has ever been asked to fulfill, a backlog of desires stretching back centuries. That constant pressure, the weight of unspoken wants, is what Jirachi carries inside its crystalline cocoon as it drifts through space. The Tanabata connection deepens when you realize that Jirachi's 7-day awakening is not a celebration, but a brief reprieve from an endless sleep. Imagine being conscious for only 1 week every 1,000 years. The rest of your existence is a coma, a darkness where time has no meaning. Jirachi does not age, does not dream in the human sense, but it must sense the approach of its comet, the slow gravitational pull that signals it is time to wake. And when it wakes, it is immediately bombarded with the desperate pleas of the world. It grants wishes, and then it is gone again, back into the void, alone. The disturbing reality of what happens to the wishmaker during its millennium of slumber is that it is not a passive sleep, it is a prison. The cocoon is not just a shell, it is a containment unit. Jirachi cannot escape its cycle. It is bound to the comet, a cosmic schedule it did not choose. The true eye remains closed, but what does it see when it is shut? Perhaps it sees the same things in our deepest sleep. Fragments of memory, echoes of voices, the faint shimmer of 1,000 years of unfulfilled desires. When you look at Jirachi from this angle, it is no longer a cute, floating star creature. It is a being trapped in an endless loop of awakening and dormancy, forced to serve as a universal wish granter for a few days before being dragged back into the silence. The Tanabata festival is a celebration of love and reunion, but for Jirachi, it is the briefest moment of existence in an otherwise eternal void. The price of a wish is not paid by the wisher, it is paid by Jirachi, who must carry the weight of every request across the centuries. And what of the comet itself? It is not just a vehicle, it is Jirachi's birthplace and tomb. When the comet returns, it opens the cocoon, and when it leaves, it seals it. The comet is a messenger, a key and a cage. There is a theory among lore hunters that Jirachi is not the only creature of its kind, that the comet might carry other sleeping beings, or that Jirachi's true form is not the small body, but the comet itself, and the Wish Granter is merely an avatar projected during the 7-day conjunction. This is the kind of mystery that echoes the earliest strange tales of Mew and the Truck, the kind of puzzle that makes you question what is really out there in the Pokemon universe. Jirachi's story is not just about wishes. It is about the cost of belief, the nature of time, and the loneliness of a being that sees the entire history of human desire flash before its true eye every 1,000 years. When the comet fades and the stars realign, Jirachi sinks back into its slumber, and the world forgets it again, but the wishes remain, floating in space, waiting for the next awakening. And somewhere out there, another mysterious visitor may be approaching Earth, carrying a secret far more alien than a wish. A creature born from a virus that fell from the stars, a being that can reshape its body at will, and a mystery that blurs the line between life and extraterrestrial biology is waiting just beyond the horizon. The previous chapter ended with Jirachi, a creature born from a wish, sealed in a comet's orbit, a being whose very existence blurred the line between folklore and the fabric of the cosmos. But what happens when the comet does not bring a wish? A sickness? What happens when the starfall carries something that does not ask to be awakened, but simply replicates? In the Pokemon universe, the answer lies in a meteorite that fell to Earth in the Hoenn region, decades before the events of the 3rd generation games. That meteorite did not contain a wish granter or a god. It contained a virus. Not a virus in the way we think of a common cold, but a virus from outer space. An entity that existed in the vacuum between worlds, waiting when it entered the oxygen-rich atmosphere and found a sample of DNA, likely from a simple organism, a piece of moss, a fungal spore, or perhaps even a human cell. It did what any virus does. It hijacked the genetic code. It wrote itself into the very blueprint of life. What emerged was a Pokemon unlike any other, a creature of pure crystalline form and shifting limbs, a being with no fixed shape, no permanent face. It was named Deoxys, a name that whispers its own origin, deoxyribonucleic acid, the DNA Pokemon. And here is where the first mandatory truth sinks in, heavy and cold. This creature is not a natural evolution. It is a mutation caused by an extraterrestrial pathogen, a space virus that learned to dream. This reveals something unsettling about the Pokemon universe. In our world, viruses are simple parasites. They are not alive in the way we define life. They cannot think, feel, or adapt beyond their crude genetic programming. But in the Pokemon world, a virus from the stars absorbed DNA and became a conscious being. That suggests that the very definition of life is broader out there, that the boundary between organic and inorganic, between code and consciousness, is not a fixed wall, but a permeable membrane. Deoxys proves that any piece of genetic information, whether from a virus, a cell, or a cosmic particle, can become a thinking, feeling creature if the conditions are right. It is a nightmare for biologists and a miracle for philosophers. The design of Deoxys only deepens this horror. Look at its default form, the normal form. The body is a long crystalline torso with 2 whip-like arms and a head that resembles a complex geometric jewel. But the true design parallel becomes clear when you compare it to a bacteriophage. A bacteriophage is a virus that infects bacteria, and its structure is famously arachnoid. An icosahedral head, a tail sheath and tail fibers that latch onto a host cell. Deoxys has that exact architecture. The head is the faceted gem. The arms and legs are the tail fibers, and the central core is the tail. This is not a vague resemblance. This is a direct borrowing from virology. The developers did not just say, it is an alien. They said, it is an alien virus. And they designed it to look like the most efficient injection machine in the natural world. Every time you see Deoxys, you are looking at a pathogen given form. But the story does not end with a lucky mutation. For years, the lore remained simple, an alien DNA Pokemon from a meteorite. Then Generation 6 arrived, and with it, the Delta episode, a post-game storyline for Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that rewrote everything. In the Delta episode, you, the player, are tasked with dealing with a second meteor hurtling toward Hoenn, one that would cause catastrophic extinction, and at the center of the crisis is a man named Zinnia, a lawkeeper of the Draconid people, who reveals the truth about Deoxys. The first meteor that brought Deoxys was not a random rock. It was intercepted in the atmosphere by Rayquaza, the sky-high Pokémon, which shattered it into pieces. Most of those pieces fell harmlessly into the ocean. But one piece contained the virus that became the Deoxys we know. However, Zinnia explains that there is more. The meteor contained not just the virus, but also evidence of an ancient interstellar battle. The Draconid legends speak of a weapon from space, a creature of pure destruction, and Deoxys might be that weapon. Or it might be a cosmic accident, a war machine that malfunctioned and became something new. The Delta episode leaves the answer ambiguous. When you reach the top of Sky Pillar and summon Rayquaza, you confront Deoxys in space. It attacks without reason, as if merely programmed to defend something, and yet when defeated, it does not vanish. It can be caught, and it becomes your ally. Is it a sentient weapon that now serves a new master? Or is it a lost creature, confused and alone, lashing out because it does not understand what it has become? The Delta episode also introduces the concept of the link cable, a device that can transfer the Mega Evolution energy from Rayquaza to you. But the deeper implication is that Deoxys is somehow tied to Rayquaza. The two are rivals, predators and prey in a cosmic cycle. Rayquaza, the ancient guardian of the atmosphere, specifically targets Deoxys. It senses the virus as a threat to the planet and responds with the same instinct that a white blood cell uses against an infection. This reinforces the idea that Deoxys is not a natural Pokémon. It is an invader, a body snatcher that wears the skin of a creature but was never meant to exist. And what does this reveal about life in the Pokémon universe? It reveals that life can begin anywhere, in any form, from any material. It reveals that the universe is teeming with potential consciousness, even in the silent drifting particles of a comet. It also reveals that the Pokémon world has a built-in immune system. Rayquaza, the legendary titan of the sky, serves as that system, a planetary antibody that awakens when the genetic integrity of the planet is threatened. Deoxys is the antigen, and Rayquaza is the response. Together, they form a biological and cosmic immune dance that has played out for millennia. Some theories even suggest that Deoxys was not the only one, that there are more viruses out there, more meteorites, more mutations waiting to happen, that every mythical Pokémon is a consequence of some cataclysm or intrusion. And if that is true, then the greatest mystery is not what Deoxys is, but what else is still falling toward us. Silent and unchanging, waiting for a planet to land on. This brings us to the next chapter, where we descend from the stars into the territory of the mind itself, into the realm where reality is fractured by sleep, and where a being of darkness holds sway over every dream. That is the story of Darkrai and the science of nightmares. But before we follow that shadow, let the image of Deoxys linger, a virus that became a soul, a weapon that became a friend, a mutation that proved that even the smallest piece of genetic code can become a legend. From the cold vacuum of space, where a virus mutated into a sentient weapon, we now descend into something far more intimate and terrifying, the landscape of your own mind. At night, when your defenses lower and your consciousness drifts, an ancient predator stirs. It has no claws, no fangs, no physical form. It moves through the veil of sleep, and when it finds you, you feel a weight on your chest, a shadow at the edge of your vision, a presence that paralyzes your limbs and whispers your deepest fears directly into your brain. This creature has a name in the Pokémon world. It is Darkrai, the pitch-black Pokémon, and it is one of the most misunderstood beings in all of myth. To understand Darkrai, we first have to travel to a place no ordinary trainer ever reached through normal gameplay: New Moon Island. In the Sinnoh region, this small, crescent-shaped landmass appears only to those who possess a rare item called the Member Card. distributed during limited time events. The island is perpetually shrouded in twilight. Its soil lack, its only feature a single gnarled tree and a deep dark pit. Here Darkrai resides, not as a king, but as an exile. The official lore says that on the night of a new moon, Darkrai is said to make people sleep and experience nightmares. But this is a sanitized version of a much older, much more chilling story. The real-world inspiration for Darkrai is one of the most universal and terrifying human experiences: sleep paralysis. Across cultures, people have described waking up unable to move, feeling a heavy weight on their chest, and sensing a malevolent entity in the room. In Japanese folklore, this entity is the Kanashibari, a ghost that binds you to your bed. In Western traditions, it became the incubus or the old hag. The science explains it as a glitch in the transition between REM sleep and waking, where the brain's motor functions remain locked, or your dream imagery bleeds into reality. But to the people who experience it, it feels like an invasion. Darkrai is the embodiment of that invasion. Its design, a thin, wraith-like figure with flowing white hair and a single red eye rising from a shadow, mirrors the classic sleep paralysis hallucination, a dark silhouette that looms over you. But here is where Pokémon lore takes a surprising turn. Darkrai is not a demon. It is not evil. It is a necessary evil in the ecosystem of the mind. Just as the brain uses nightmares to process trauma, to rehearse threats, and to consolidate memories, Darkrai's power is not inherently malicious. It is a force that forces confrontation with fear. Without nightmares, we would never learn to be afraid of the dark, of falling, of being chased. Without Darkrai, the psyche might never develop the defenses it needs to survive. In the Pokémon world, Darkrai is often described as the harbinger of doom, but that title is a cruel misunderstanding. The true tragedy of Darkrai is that it never intended to cause harm. It simply cannot control its own aura. This tragic backstory is most powerfully told in the film The Rise of Darkrai. There Darkrai appears over the town of Alamus, dragging innocent people into terrible nightmares. The townsfolk fear it, hunt it, and blame it for a coming disaster. But as the story unfolds, we learn that Darkrai was not the villain. It was a protector, a being that saw a greater catastrophe approaching and tried to warn the people. But its only voice was fear. It had been alone for so long, hiding in shadows, that it forgot how to communicate without terror, and in its final sacrifice to save the town, the truth. Darkrai is not a nightmare that wants to hurt you. It is a nightmare that wants to wake you up. The New Moon Island incident in the games captures this isolation perfectly. The island is empty, silent, and you approach the pit that leads to Darkrai's lair. There is no music, only wind. When you finally encounter Darkrai, it does not attack immediately. It simply looks at you, and then it forces you into a dream where you are trapped, running through a distorted version of your own world. It is not a battle of strength. It is a battle of will. The only way to defeat Darkrai is to prove that you are not afraid of the darkness inside your own head. And perhaps that is the deepest mystery of Darkrai. It is a mirror. The nightmares it gives you are not random. They are your nightmares, the fears you carry, and the only way to survive New Moon Island is to face them. That is why Darkrai is a necessary evil, because without it, we would never learn to look into the abyss and find that we are still standing. But if Darkrai governs the shadows of the mind, what of the pure healing light that follows such a long night? What of the gratitude that can mend a broken world? That is a story that begins with a tiny hedgehog, a flower, and a paradox that might be even stranger than the nightmare itself. Up next is Chapter 9, Shaymin and the Gratitude Paradox. From the shadowy realm of nightmares, we turn now to something that seems, at first, like its complete opposite. A creature of pure gratitude, of flower petals and gentle breezes. But Darkrai taught us that nightmares have a necessary place in the mind's ecosystem. Then Shaymin reveals something even stranger. That gratitude itself carries a hidden, almost paradoxical power, one that can rewrite the very form of a Pokémon. Shaymin is the gratitude Pokémon. Its entire identity is built around the emotion of thankfulness. a concept so soft and intangible that it feels almost out of place among the cosmic deities and apocalyptic forces we have been exploring. Yet Shaymin's lore is not just a simple lesson in being nice. It is rooted in a deep, almost botanical logic that ties together purification, rebirth, and the most ancient human concept of all, home. Let us begin with the Gracidea flower. This small pink bloom appears only in specific conditions and is the key to unlocking Shaymin's sky form. In the games, when a Shaymin is exposed to a Gracidea during the daytime, it transforms, its body elongates, its fur becomes white and green, and it gains the ability to fly. The transformation is not permanent. Once night falls, or if Shaymin is deposited into a PC, it reverts to its smaller hedgehog-like land form. This mechanic alone suggests something profound. The Gracidea flower acts as a catalyst for a state of being that is not natural to Shaymin, but rather a gift granted by the environment and by the gratitude of others. The real-world botanical inspirations for the Gracidea are a fascinating puzzle. The flower's name is almost certainly a portmanteau of gratitude and idea, but its appearance resembles a number of real plants, particularly the prairie gentian or the lisianthus, which are often associated with gratitude and appreciation in the language of flowers. There is also a curious connection to the gardenia, a flower named after the Scottish botanist Alexander Garden. But the Gracidea's pink petals and central yellow disc are more reminiscent of a small daisy or a wildflower. Perhaps the most telling parallel is with the forget-me-not, a tiny blue flower that symbolizes remembrance and true love. In the context of Shaymin, the Gracidea represents a memory of kindness, a token of a bond that transcends the physical. But the deeper mystery lies in why a flower should be able to alter a Pokemon's biology so radically. Shaymin's Sky Formy is not just a different look, it is a different ecological role. In land form, Shaymin is a terrestrial hedgehog-like creature, capable of purifying polluted areas by absorbing toxins and releasing clean air. This ability alone makes it a symbol of environmental rebirth. According to its Pokédex entries from multiple generations, Shaymin can dissolve toxic substances and transform barren land into fields of flowers. It is a living purifier, a miniature terraformer that brings life back to dead soil. In a world where human industry and Pokémon battles can scar the landscape, Shaymin is the quiet healer, the one that restores balance without fanfare. Yet the Sky form elevates this role. When Shaymin takes to the air, it becomes a messenger, a traveler. Its flying ability allows it to spread seeds and pollen across vast distances, accelerating the cycle of regrowth. The Sky form is not just a combat upgrade, it is an ecological tool. And here we arrive at the hidden connection between Sky form and the concept of hearth and home. Home is not merely a place where one lives. Home is a space that has been tended, purified, made safe. Shaymin's gratitude is tied to the idea of returning a favour, of giving back to the land that shelters it. When Shaymin transforms, it is not becoming more powerful in a selfish sense. It is becoming more capable of serving its community. The Sky form is a form of service. The gratitude paradox, then, is this. Shaymin's greatest strength comes not from its own desire, but from the appreciation of others. In the movie, Giratina and the Sky Warrior, Shaymin is initially arrogant and ungrateful, refusing to acknowledge the help it receives. Only when it learns to accept and express gratitude does it unlock its Sky form. The film makes explicit that transformation is a response to genuine thankfulness, both from Shaymin and toward Shaymin. This is a radical concept for a Pokémon. It suggests that emotional bonds have a tangible, physical effect on the world. The Gracidea flower is the symbol of that bond, a natural object that holds the power to catalyze change because it represents a promise kept, a kindness remembered. Consider the real-world folklore of gratitude flowers. In many cultures, giving a flower is a gesture of thanks, but the flower itself is ephemeral. It wilts, it dies. The Gracidea in the Pokémon world is also rare and delicate. It cannot be grown in just any soil. It requires a specific environment, one that has been purified, perhaps by Shaymin itself. This creates a cycle. A polluted land prevents the Grassadier from growing, so a Shaymin must first purify the land, which then allows the Grassadier to bloom, which in turn enables Shaymin to transform and spread further purification. It is a feedback loop of ecological gratitude, and this brings us to the deeper symbolism. Shaymin is a flower-based Pokémon, yes, but it is not a plant. It is an animal that mimics a flower. Its landform resembles a hedgehog covered in grass and blooms, a living garden. In Japanese folklore, there is a concept called Atsuyume, the first dream of the new year, which often features Mount Fuji, a hawk, and an eggplant, not directly related, but the idea of small, auspicious symbols carrying great meaning is woven into Japanese culture. Shaymin is small, cute, and easily overlooked, yet it carries the power to heal the planet. That is the paradox. The most humble creature holds the key to environmental rebirth. The mandatory beat we must touch is the cycle of purification and rebirth. Shaymin does not destroy pollution. It absorbs and transforms it. This is a form of alchemy, turning poison into petals. The gratitude part comes from the fact that this purification is often a response to someone's care. In the games, you obtain Shaymin through an event, and then you must take it to a specific spot, the Flower Paradise, to meet another Shaymin and receive the Grassadier. That journey is a pilgrimage of thanks. The player is grateful to have the Pokémon, and the Pokémon is grateful to return to its natural home. Now we must transition to the next chapter, which deals with Victini and the ethics of infinite power. But before we leave Shaymin, consider this. What if gratitude itself is a form of power? What if the ability to be thankful is what allows a creature to transcend its limits? Shaymin does not become stronger through anger or ambition. It becomes stronger through connection. That is a lesson that stands in stark contrast to the next mythical we will examine. Victini represents victory, success, and infinite potential. But does infinite power come with an ethical cost? Can a creature that embodies winning ever be truly good? Those questions will pull us into a very different kind of paradox. One that asks whether it is possible to have too much of a good thing. For now, let the image of Shaymin floating over a field of Grassadier linger, a silent reminder that even the smallest act of thanks can change the world. From the quiet, gentle cycle of gratitude and purification that surrounds Shaymin, we turn now to a Pokémon whose power is far less peaceful, far more absolute. A creature that represents not rebirth, not balance, but an iron guarantee, victory. And not just any victory, but victory at any cost. This is Victini. At first glance, Victini seems charming. A small rabbit-like Pokémon with oversized ears, a cheerful expression, and a body patterned with the letter V. That V is no accident. It is the Roman numeral for 5, but more directly, it is the symbol of victory. Victini's very name is a fusion of victory and destiny, as though it were born to ensure that its trainer never loses, and the legend surrounding it promises exactly that. A trainer who befriends Victini is said to win every battle they enter, no matter the odds. It is a perfect being, a living guarantee of success. But pause for a moment and consider what that guarantee actually means. If you cannot lose, then every fight you ever enter is fixed before it begins. There is no strategy, no growth, no learning from failure. Victory becomes a hollow ritual, a foregone conclusion. And more troubling still, what is the cost of such certainty? In the Pokémon world, battles are not always friendly gym matches. Wild Pokémon fight for survival. The evil teams of Unova and beyond are willing to destroy cities, to manipulate the weather, to reshape the very fabric of reality. If Victini guarantees victory regardless of the cost, then what happens when the cost is something terrible? A life, a region, truth itself. This dark implication is not just a philosophical thought experiment. It is written into Victini's history, hidden beneath the Liberty Garden lighthouse for centuries. Let us go back to where Victini was discovered, or rather where it was hidden. On a small island just off the coast of Unova, there stands a lighthouse. Not just any lighthouse, but the Liberty Garden lighthouse, a solitary tower that has become a landmark of the region. but its true purpose was never to guide ships. Below that lighthouse, in a basement sealed for generations, the Unova government imprisoned Victini. Why? Because they understood that the promise of infinite victory is a poison. They saw what happened when the creature's power was unleashed. The V for victory came to represent a scorched earth policy. Ancient records speak of armies that used Victini to crush their enemies, only to find that the victory came at the expense of everything they held dear. Fields burned, rivers dried, entire civilizations collapsed under the weight of their own assured success. Victory had become a curse, so the government took Victini away. They locked it in the lighthouse basement, not because they feared its power. They became the guardians of a secret that could destroy Unova, and there Victini remained, forgotten by history, until a trainer with a pure heart and a desire to explore finally opened that sealed door. But the question remains: if Victini can guarantee victory, is it ethical to use it at all? Every battle you win with Victini is a battle stripped of meaning. The opponent never stood a chance. The stakes were never real, and the cost, whatever it was paid without your knowledge. Liberty Garden is not just a prison. It is a monument to the idea that some powers are too dangerous to wield, no matter how tempting. The lighthouse beam that sweeps across the bay is not a welcome to sailors. It is a warning. We will leave that warning hanging in the air as we move forward to another creature whose story is woven with themes of justice and honor, but also loss. A Pokemon who once fought alongside 3 warriors, only to be left behind in the pages of a forgotten legend, the Lost Musketeers. That is where we go next. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. From the scorched earth of Liberty Garden, where Victini's victory came at any cost, we now travel to a different kind of battlefield. One, not of fire and ash, but of ice and abandonment. The Unova region, for all its urban sprawl and technological marvels, hides a frozen wilderness in its north. The giant chasm, the twist mountain, the cold sea roots where the water itself seems to hold its breath. And it is here, in this desolate white expanse, that we find a young Pokemon named Keldeo, alone, searching for something it never truly possessed, its own legend. To understand Keldeo, we have to step away from the kami and yokai of Japan, the 1,000-year comets, the dream demons, the gratitude flowers, and turn instead to Western literature, specifically to a swashbuckling novel published in 1844 by Alexandre Dumas. The inspiration is not subtle. 3 powerful swordsmen, Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion, each embody a classical virtue: lead, iron, and justice. They are the Swords of Justice, a title that deliberately echoes the Musketeers' motto, all for one, one for all. And like Dumas' heroes, they have a protege, a young eager fourth, Keldeo, the colt of the sea, who dreams of becoming a musketeer himself. But here is where the fairy tale gets complicated. In Dumas' story, D'Artagnan eventually earns his place through courage and loyalty. In the Pokemon world, Keldeo's journey is marked by a fracture, a separation that we are still trying to piece together. The official lore tells us that Keldeo is the youngest member of the Swords of Justice, a student trained by the 3 elders. Yet when we encounter it in the games, Keldeo is not travelling with its mentors. It appears in the wild, if you can call an event distribution wild, on a remote island in Unova's frozen sea, or as a gift from a mysterious stranger. Why is it there, far from the lush forests and rocky plateaus where Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion roam? The answer lies in a trial, a rite of passage that is equal parts test of strength and purification of spirit. This is the hidden trial of the oath-taking stone. In the lore scattered across the games, the anime, and the promotional material, there is a sacred stone in Unova. Some say it lies deep within the giant chasm. Others claim it is the very foundation of the Maw of Icyrus. At this stone, a trainer can prove themselves worthy. But for Keldeo, The oath-taking stone is not about battling, it is about facing a reflection. The stone is said to reveal the true heart of whoever touches it, and for a Pokémon desperate to prove itself, that mirror can be merciless. Keldeo's ordinary form is small, somewhat timid, more like a pony than a warhorse. Its mane is not yet a warrior's plume. Its voice, when it speaks through telepathy or emotion, carries a wavering note. This is the form of a student still unsure of his place. But there is another Keldeo, a form few have seen, the resolute form. In this shape, Keldeo's mane ignites into a thick, flowing banner of water and light. Its hooves strike the earth with the echo of a battle cry. It becomes, for a fleeting moment, the equal of its mentors. And the trigger for this transformation is not experience, not leveling up, but the secret move called Secret Sword. A technique that only the oath-taking stone can teach. Why did the Swords of Justice leave Keldeo in the frozen wastes of Unova? Perhaps it was not abandonment, but a final lesson. The Musketeers knew that a true warrior must learn to be alone. They placed their young student on that cold island, not to punish, but to force him to confront the silence. In the quiet of the snow, with no mentor to guide him, Keldeo had to find his own oath. He had to decide what he was fighting for. Was it glory? Was it the approval of his elders? Or was it something deeper? The protection of justice itself. Even when no one is watching, the oath-taking stone, when it is finally found, does not grant power easily. It demands a truth. And in the moment Keldeo touches that stone, he sees not his mentors, not the battles ahead, but his own doubt. The resolute form is not a reward. It is the outward shape of an inward decision. Keldeo must say with his whole being, I am a musketeer. I will fight for those who cannot fight. I will stand alone if I must. And only then does the water of his mane rise, and the secret sword become his to wield. But even after that transformation, the mystery lingers. Why does Keldeo remain in Unova's cold, long after his training is complete? Some believe he is waiting for something, a call that has not yet come. Others whisper that the three elders themselves are lost, scattered across regions, and that Keldeo's separation is a sign of a greater fracture in the Swords of Justice. Perhaps the frozen wastes are not a prison, but a vigil. Keldeo keeps watch over something the stone has shown him, a coming darkness that only a united band, 4 musketeers, not 3, can face. The story of Keldeo is a story of becoming. It begins with a borrowed legend and ends with a self-made one, and it stands as a bridge between the folklore of the East and the chivalric romances of the West, proving that Pokemon's mythology is not bound by any one culture. The swords are drawn, the path is cold, but the cult is no longer a child. And yet, as we leave this frozen vigil, the air begins to hum with a different kind of melody, a song that rises not from the wind, but from a stage that has stood silent for centuries. If you listen closely in the next chapter, you might hear the faint echo of an opera that was never meant to end. A ghost haunts the theatre, and its name is Meloetta. The previous chapter ended with Keldeo standing at the oath-taking stone, the water still rippling from his trial. That story was about becoming worthy of a legacy, about proving oneself against the shadow of 3 legendary swordsmen. But what happens when a Pokemon's legacy is not about battle at all, but about expression? What happens when the very nature of a creature is performance, and its true power lies not in a blade, but in a song? Meloetta is one of the most unusual mythical Pokémon ever designed, because she does not fit neatly alongside the Create's Destroyers or Cosmic Guardians. She is a performer, a singer, a dancer, and yet, beneath that graceful exterior, lies one of the most mysterious abilities in the Pokémon world. The power to change form through a melody lost to time. The Relic Song. Think about what that means for a moment. A piece of music so ancient that it predates recorded history, so potent that it can physically reshape a living creature, and so specific that only one Pokémon in existence can sing it. Meloetta's aria form is her natural state, elegant and composed like a soprano on a grand stage. But when she sings the Relic Song, she transforms into her pirouette form, and the dancer becomes a fighter, Her movements shift from fluid grace to sharp, rhythmic strikes. It is as if the melody unlocks a different side of her soul, one that belongs to a warrior from a forgotten age. This dual nature is not just a gameplay gimmick. It is a reflection of the performing arts themselves. Every singer knows that a song can carry both joy and sorrow, that the same melody can make an audience weep or cheer. Every dancer knows that movement can tell a story of love or of war. Meloetta embodies that duality. She is both the gentle aria and the fierce pirouette, and the relic song is the bridge between them. But what is the relic song really? Where did it come from? The games tell us it is a move that only Meloetta can learn, and that using it causes her to change form. But the lore goes deeper. The relic song is often described as a melody that has been passed down through generations. A tune from an era before the invention of the Power Ball. That is a startling clue. It suggests that Meloetta's history stretches back to a time when humans and Pokémon did not have the convenience of those red and white spheres. A time when bonds were forged through trust, ritual, and shared culture. Meloetta herself may be a living artifact of that world. She represents the cultural history of the Pokémon universe before the Pokéball standardized the relationship between humans and Pokémon. In that ancient age, music and dance were likely central to communication and bonding. Meloetta's existence hints at a prehistoric society where performance was not just entertainment, but a form of connection, perhaps even a form of power. She is a whisper from a time when every song could change reality. And that is where the mystery deepens, because the relic song does not just change Meloetta, it has the power to alter reality itself. In the games, when Meloetta uses the move, it deals damage to opponents while simultaneously triggering her transformation. But the lore surrounding the move is far more mysterious. Some legends claim that the relic song can calm the hearts of those who hear it, or awaken hidden emotions. There are even stories that it can call upon spirits, or that it was once used in ancient ceremonies to communicate with the dead. That last detail brings us to the ghost of the opera, because Meloetta's story has always had a theatrical, almost haunting quality. In the anime, she appears in a haunted mansion, singing a melancholy tune. Her presence is tied to a lost performance, a show that never ended. The idea of a Pokémon who embodies the ghost of an opera is not just poetic. It is a reference to the phantom of the opera, to the idea that beauty and tragedy are inseparable in performing arts. Meloetta is the phantom. She is the melody that lingers after the curtain falls, the dance that echoes in an empty hall. And yet she is not a ghost in the traditional sense. She is very much alive, but she carries the weight of an ancient tradition. Her dual forms are not just about combat versus performance. They are about the two faces of art itself. The public performance and the private struggle. The aria is the polished, perfect expression. The pirouette is the raw, visceral emotion. Together, they make a complete artist. So Meloetta stands as a bridge between two worlds. She connects the age of myth to the age of technology. She connects music to battle. She connects the performer to the audience. And at the heart of all of it is the relic song, a melody that holds the power to our reality, but only when sung by the one who understands its meaning. What other ancient secrets lie hidden in the notes of that song? And what happens when a creature from a bygone era is brought into the modern world? That is a question we will have to answer another time, because the next chapter takes us even further back, to a time before humans, before music, before the very concept of a Pokéball. We are about to meet a predator from the Paleozoic, a creature of steel and fury, resurrected from the fossil record with a cannon on its back. Its name is Genesect, and its story will challenge everything you think you know about the line between life and machine. From the haunting melody of a lost song that could reshape reality, we now turn to something far more primal, a resurrection not of art or form, but of a predator from an age before memory, a creature that never should have walked the modern world, yet was dragged into it by the hands of those who thought they could control the past. Team Plasma's Project P2 was not the work of mad scientists in the traditional sense. It was cold, methodical, and rooted in the belief that the ends justified any means. Somewhere deep in the earth, trapped in amber, or frozen in permafrost, the fossil of an insect from 300 million years ago was unearthed. This was no ordinary prehistoric bug. This was a hunter from the Carboniferous period, a time when the air held more oxygen and the land belonged to monstrous arthropods. Using technology that blurred the line between revival and creation, Team Plasma brought it back, but they did not simply resurrect it. They rebuilt it. They gave it cannon. They gave it armor. They gave it a purpose it never asked for, and they called it Genesect. The ethics of Project P2 are haunting. This was not a rescue or a conservation effort. It was weaponization. The Pokémon they created had never existed in nature. The original species, whatever it was, lived and died in an era before flowers bloomed, before the first dinosaurs stirred. It knew nothing of humans, of technology, of war, yet it was remade into a living missile, a tool of Team Plasma's ambition. The question is not whether they could do it. The question is why they thought they should. If you look at Genesect and compare it to real creatures, you start to see the shape of the original animal. The long body segmented like an isopod, the 6 legs ending in claws, the large eyes adapted for low light. It resembles the giant isopods that still crawl along the ocean floor today, scavengers of the abyss. But it also carries the silhouette of ancient predatory insects, like the Magearna, a dragonfly with a wingspan of over 2 feet that hunted the skies of the Carboniferous. Those insects were apex predators of their time. Genesect would have been no different. But here is the tragedy. That original creature, whatever it was, had an instinctual life. It hunted, it survived, it reproduced. It did not know ambition or cruelty. It simply was. Team Plasma took that instinct and twisted it, grafting on a cannon that fires elemental beams, programming combat protocols into its neural pathways. And now Genesect wanders a world that has no place for it. A world of concrete and steel, of Pokémon that evolved alongside humans, of rules and leagues and battles that are supposed to be sport. Genesect does not battle for sport, it battles because it was made to. The tragedy of this creation is that it cannot return to its own time. It cannot adapt to this one either. It is forever out of place, a relic that was never meant to be unearthed. Some say it searches for others of its kind, that it cries out in the night for a family that died 300 million years ago. If that is true, then Genesect is not a monster. It is a victim, a biological weapon struggling to find its place in a modern world that only wants to use it or destroy it. The story of Genesect is a warning. Resurrection is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a curse placed on a creature that never asked to be born twice. And as we move deeper into the strange science of Pokémon creation, we will encounter another legend born not from fossil, but from carbon itself, a being of diamond and pressure, a queen forged in the earth. That will be our next destination, Diancie and the alchemy of carbon. But for now, let the weight of the Paleozoic predator settle in your mind, a predator that never wanted to be a weapon, a creature that is still searching for its own forgotten song. From the resurrection of an ancient predator, locked in ice for 300 million years, we now turn to something far more precious and far more fragile. A creature born not from the depths of prehistoric oceans, but from the crushing darkness of the earth itself, where Genesect was a weapon revived. Diancie is a wonder that should never have existed at all. To understand Diancie, you must first understand Carbink. Carbink are small, gem-like Pokémon that dwell deep underground, their bodies formed from compressed carbon over millions of years. They are common in the caves of the Kalos region, often mistaken for ordinary rocks, until they reveal their shimmering blue cores. But here is the mystery. Every so often, under conditions that are almost impossibly rare, a Carbink will undergo a transformation that defies the normal rules of evolution. It does not evolve in the way a Pidgey becomes a Pidgeot. It becomes something else entirely. A queen, a mutation, a living diamond. The biological link between Carbink and Diancie is not a simple evolutionary chain. It is a story of extreme pressure and perfect accident. Geologists will tell you that a diamond is just carbon that has been subjected to intense heat and pressure for billions of years. The same principle applies here when a carbink is exposed to the right kind of tectonic force, when the weight of the world presses down upon its crystalline body. Something within it shifts. The carbon lattice reorganizes. The creature sheds its rough exterior and emerges as Diancie, a being made of pure, flawless diamond. But this is not a guaranteed process. It is a rare, almost mythical event, which is why Diancie was long believed to be a legend. A story told by miners to explain the occasional glittering apparition deep in the earth. Diancie is in essence a mutant queen. It is the apex of its kind, a ruler born from the suffering of pressure, and like many rulers throughout human history, it carries a curse. This connection to the Hope Diamond is not accidental. The Hope Diamond, one of the most famous gemstones in the world, is said to be cursed, bringing misfortune and death to its owners. Its deep blue colour and flawless clarity have fascinated collectors for centuries, but its history is soaked in tragedy. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette both owned it, and both lost their heads. Other owners faced bankruptcy, suicide and murder. The diamond became a symbol of beauty, intertwined with doom. Diancie inherits this folklore in a quieter, more melancholic way. In the Pokémon world, Diancie is not malevolent. It is a gentle creature that uses its power to create diamonds and protect its fellow carbink. Yet its very existence is a kind of curse. Because Diancie is so rare, it is hunted. Because it can create infinite wealth with a thought, it is coveted. And because it is the only one of its kind, it is profoundly alone. The legend of the cursed gemstone finds its echo here, not in a malicious spirit, but in the isolation of a queen who can never share her throne. And then there is the matter of mega evolution. Diancie possesses a mega stone that triggers a transformation beyond even its already remarkable form. When Diancie mega evolves, it becomes something otherworldly. Its body grows larger, more angular, more brilliant. Its diamond structure achieves a perfection that no natural process could ever create. This is the pinnacle of alchemical transformation. Alchemy, the ancient art of turning base metals into gold, was always a metaphor for spiritual purification. The alchemists sought to perfect the soul through fire and pressure. Just as carbon is perfected into diamond, Diancie's mega evolution is that process made visible. It is the philosopher's stone-given form, the ultimate refinement of matter and spirit combined into one radiant being. But here is the unsettling truth: that perfection is fleeting. Mega evolution in Diancie requires a special stone and an intense bond with a trainer, and even then the transformation cannot last. After the battle ends, the diamond cracks, the light fades, and Diancie returns to its ordinary state. The alchemical dream is temporary. The curse of the diamond is that its beauty is never truly permanent, only remembered. So what are we to make of Diancie? It is a creature born from pressure, shaped by folklore, and perfected by alchemy. It carries the weight of a cursed jewel, but chooses to create rather than destroy. It is a queen without a court, a legend trapped in a gem. And its story reminds us that the most beautiful things are often the most fragile and the most dangerous. But not all mythical treasures are meant to be found. Some are meant to be sealed away forever, which brings us to a prison bottle and the being it was designed to contain. From the cursed sparkle of the Hope Diamond, we move to a different kind of prison, one made not of carbon but of ancient stone and myth. The diamond was formed under unimaginable pressure. But what happens when the pressure is released on a force that should never have been contained? What happens when the bottle is opened? The creature known as Hoopa first appeared in the Kalos region, though its origins stretch far beyond that temperate land, into the hottest, driest deserts of history. In its restrained form, Hoopa appears as a small, mischievous imp, a tiny creature barely more than 2 feet tall, with a golden ring on each arm and a playful, almost childish demeanor. It is easy to underestimate a being like that. It is easy to mistake it for a mere trickster, a prankster who steals berries and hides things in the sand. But the truth is far older, far darker, and far more terrifying. Hoopa is a djinn. The word itself comes from the Arabic for a supernatural spirit, a being of smokeless fire, capable of granting wishes, but bound by a will of its own. In the folklore of the Middle East, jinn are not the friendly genies of Disney. They are tricksters, sometimes malevolent, always dangerous. They twist your words and grant your desires in ways you never intended. This is the myth behind the monkey's paw, a cursed talisman that grants 3 wishes, each one delivered with a horrible unintended consequence. Hoopa is the Pokemon incarnation of that very idea, and like a djinn, Hoopa has a prison. The prison bottle is not a lamp you rub to summon a helper. It is a vessel designed to hold something terrible inside. When the bottle is shattered or uncorked, Hoopa is not freed to serve you. It is freed to become itself in its truest, most horrifying form. That form is called Unbound Hoopa, and it is one of the most physically imposing mythical Pokemon ever designed. Towering at over 21 feet tall, with 6 massive arms, each tipped with a gigantic golden ring, its body now a twisted, demonic mass of red, purple and black. Its eyes burn with an unearthly light, and its power is no longer confined to pranks. The Unbound form grants Hoopa the ability to warp space and time. It does not teleport. It tears holes in the fabric of reality itself. These are the 6 rings you have heard about. Each of Hoopa's 6 arms holds a ring in its unbound state, and those rings are not mere accessories. They are portals. Hyperspace holes that can reach across dimensions, across continents, across the very boundaries of what we understand as distance. With a sweep of its arm, Hoopa can open a ring that leads anywhere, and that is not the limit of its power. In the lore of the Pokemon world, and in the events of the movie Hoopa and the Clash of Ages, the true danger, Hoopa can use its rings to summon other legendary Pokemon, dragging them from their homes and forcing them into a single location. We have seen a single point in time and space become a battlefield of deities. Legendaries from every generation, from Groudon and Kyogre to Dialga and Palkia, pull through the rings against their will. The result is chaos. The result is a war of titans that threatens to tear the world apart. And all of it is orchestrated by a single creature, a being that was once a harmless-looking imp. This is the mystery of the 6 rings. Why 6? In many ancient traditions, the number 6 is associated with the Seal of Solomon, a ring or star that was said to give King Solomon power over jinn. It is a symbol of control and binding, but in Hoopa's case, the rings become the instruments of its release. They are the keys to its prison, and once it is free, it uses them to summon an army of gods. It is a chilling inversion of the old myth. The djinn is not enslaved by the ring is its weapon. And then there is the concept of the monkey's paw. Hoopa's power is often linked to wishes. In the events of the movie, a dark version of Hoopa, a shadow born from its own bitterness, uses the prison bottle's power to try and destroy everything. The wishes granted by a djinn never end well. The monkey's paw is a story where a man wishes for money and receives it only after his son dies in an accident. Hoopa's wishes, if they exist at all, would carry that same cruel irony. The creature is not evil in the human sense. It is a force of nature, a being of pure potential, without morality, and that is far more frightening. To hold a djinn in a bottle is to possess a weapon you cannot control. To break that bottle is to invite catastrophe, and yet there is another mythical whose power is not contained in a bottle, but rather channeled through steam and pressure. A being that might just represent the opposite of chaos, the promise of a controlled revolution. We will explore that power next. Hoopa's prison bottle was sealed for a reason. When that djinn broke free, it warped the very fabric of space and time, pulling objects and beings from across the world into a single screaming vortex. But if Hoopa represents chaos let loose, then Volcanion represents a different kind of unleashed power, born not from ancient magic, but from iron, pressure, and the relentless march of industry. This is the story of a Pokemon that shouldn't exist, a creature whose very typing defies the laws of nature, and the hidden history of a revolution that nearly consumed an entire region. To understand Volcanion, you have to understand steam. Not the gentle wisp from a kettle, but the invisible, explosive force that drove the engines of the Industrial Revolution. Water heated beyond its boiling point becomes a gas that expands to over 1,000 times its original volume. Trapped inside a sealed chamber, that expansion turns into raw mechanical power, the same power that pulled trains, spun mills, and built the modern world. But steam can also kill. When a boiler fails, it doesn't just leak, it detonates with the force of a bomb, sending shards of metal through walls and bodies. Volcanion embodies that duality perfectly. It is the only Pokémon with the dual typing of fire and water, a combination that game designers once called impossible, as fire and water should cancel each other out, but they don't cancel, they combine. The result is steam, and steam is not a compromise. It is a weapon. Volcanion's body is a living pressure vessel. Its signature move, Steam Eruption, is a geyser of superheated water that can melt steel and boil flesh in an instant. The Pokédex tells us that Volcanion can expel steam from its arms at a temperature of over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot enough to vaporize rock. And here is the terrifying part. Volcanion does not simply generate heat. It absorbs water, stores it inside its body, and then superheats it under enormous pressure. The resulting eruption is not just fire, not just water, but a phase change that carries both the heat of flame and the suffocating weight of a tidal wave. It is one of the most physically devastating attacks in the entire Pokémon world. And it exists because Volcanion was built for a purpose. That purpose ties directly to the industrial history of the Kalos region. Long before the events of the games, Kalos was a land of ancient kingdoms and mysterious technology. But somewhere in the past, a project began. A project to create artificial life. This was the same lineage that would eventually produce the synthetic Pokémon Magearna. But Volcanion came first, or perhaps alongside it. Volcanion is not a naturally occurring creature. It is a constructed entity, a product of the same steam-powered revolution that drove Kalos into a new age. Think of it as a prototype, a living engine designed to harness the raw power of steam for industrial and possibly military applications. The relationship between Volcanion and Magearna is not one of creator and creation, but of two divergent paths from the same mechanical root. Magearna was built with a soul heart, a device that gave it consciousness and emotion. Volcanion was built with a boiler, a furnace that gave it fury and force. One was meant to serve, the other was meant to destroy. But Volcanion is not a mindless machine. It possesses a will of its own, and that will lead it away from the cities and factories of Kalos. It fled, or perhaps it was exiled, to a place called the Nebel Plateau. This is a remote forested highland shrouded in mist, hidden from the maps of civilization. And the Nebel Plateau holds a secret far older than Volcanion. It is a sanctuary, a haven for Pokémon that have been hurt by humans. The lore says that this land was set aside long ago, a protected realm where wounded creatures could recover without fear of hunters, researchers, or trainers. Volcanion, a being born from human ambition and abuse, found its home there. It became the guardian of that plateau, a silent sentinel watching over the refugees of human cruelty. The steam that vents from its body is not just a weapon, it is a warning, a barrier of heat and mist that keeps intruders out and keeps the innocent safe inside. There is a sadness to Volcanion that many overlook. It is a creature of immense power, but that power was never its own. It was designed, manufactured, and then abandoned. Its very existence is a testament to the hubris of a civilization that thought it could control steam, control fire, control life itself. And like Hoopa's bottle, the forces that created Volcanion were not easily contained. The steam-powered revolution that gave rise to this Pokémon also left scars across Kalos. Rusting machinery, polluted waterways, and the bitter memory of a war fought with fire and iron. Volcanion is the living symbol of that age, and it carries the weight of an entire era's mistakes. on its metallic shoulders. But there is another secret hidden within Volcanion's story, one that links directly to the Magearna project, the same technology that gave Volcanion its power. The steam engine, the pressure vessel, was also the foundation for something far more delicate, a soul. Not a soul in the religious sense, but a mechanical heart capable of housing true emotion. If Volcanion is the fist of the revolution, then Magearna is its heart. And the story of how that heart was built, and why it was hidden away, is a mystery that leads deep into the forgotten corners of Kalos, into the workshops of an inventor who dared to play God. That is the tale we will explore next. To the story of the soul heart and the artificial princess who may hold the key to understanding everything. But for now, let the steam settle. And remember the lesson of the Nebel Plateau, that even the most powerful machines can learn to protect, and that sometimes the greatest revolution is the one that turns away from destruction and toward peace. The previous chapter left us standing in the steam-choked factories of the Kalos region, where the Industrial Revolution was not just reshaping the land, but also the very boundaries of what a Pokémon could be. Volcanion was the force that powered those early machines, a living engine of fire and water that turned the wheels of progress. But progress has a way of demanding more than raw power. It demands intelligence. It demands a soul. Deep within the same kingdom that once relied on Volcanion's steam, a different kind of creation was being forged. Not a Pokémon born from nature, not one discovered in a forest or a cave, but one designed from scratch, piece by human hands. This is the story of Magearna, the artificial Pokémon, and the haunting mystery of its sentient core. 500 years ago, in the Azoth Kingdom, a small but prosperous realm within what is now the Kalos region, the royal family grew obsessed with an idea that had haunted inventors and philosophers for centuries. They wanted to create life, not through breeding or evolution, but through mechanism, through science, through art. The result was Magearna, a Pokémon built entirely from metal and gears, powered by a strange, glowing heart called the Soul Heart. And here is where the mystery begins. That Soul Heart was not a simple battery. It was a vessel for something more. According to the legends preserved in the kingdom's archives, the heart was infused with the life force of a real Pokémon, a donor whose spirit was transferred into the mechanical shell. Some say it was a beloved partner of the royal family. Others whisper that it was a sacrifice, a willing gift to give the kingdom an immortal guardian. The Magearna that survived into the modern era is a faded, rusted version of its original self. Its body has taken on a metallic blue patina, and its once vibrant colours are muted by time. But there is another version, a secret kept by the Azoth lineage, the original colour Magearna. This form is not a separate species. It is the original prototype, the very first artificial Pokémon ever created, preserved in perfect condition because it was never activated. It was sealed away in a hidden chamber, waiting for a moment that never came, because the tragedy of the Azoth Kingdom is that the royal family did not survive to unveil it. The kingdom collapsed in a sudden, unexplained calamity. Some records hint at a catastrophic experiment gone wrong, perhaps an attempt to create an even more powerful artificial life form. Others speak of a betrayal, a rival kingdom's invasion. But the most chilling theory is that the very act of creating an artificial soul upset a natural balance that the people of that time did not fully understand. The kingdom vanished, and the original colour Magearna slept for centuries, sealed away with the ghosts of its creators. Now this invention did not happen in a vacuum. In our own world, the 18th century was gripped by what historians call the automaton craze. Across Europe, master clockmakers built mechanical figures that could write, play music, even breathe. Most famous of these was the Mechanical Turk, a chess-playing automaton that appeared to think for itself. Audiences were spellbound and terrified. They feared that these machines might one day become alive, that the line between the crafted and the living could be crossed. That same fear echoed through the Azoth Kingdom. When Magearna first activated, Its eyes opened, and it looked at its creator. The king himself is said to have wept, not from joy, but from the sudden, overwhelming dread of what he had done. He had made a being that could feel, and he knew he could not control it. The soul heart technology was never replicated. It was lost with the kingdom, and only the faintest traces remain in the modern Pokédex entries and the whispered tales of old Colossian families. To this day, no one knows exactly how the soul heart works. Is it a captured soul, as the legends suggest, or is it something stranger? A fragment of a universal consciousness that the Azoth scientists accidentally tapped into. The mystery remains unsolved, and every time a Magearna blinks to life, it carries that question with it. And that brings us to the shadow that follows every story of created life. When you build a being from metal and magic, you must ask what happens to the pieces that fall away. What lurks in the spaces between the gears? In the moments when the artificial soul is uncertain of its own existence. In the next chapter, we will meet a Pokémon that does not come from any forge, but from the very absence of light. A creature that steals the shadows of others to give itself form. That chapter is called Marshadow and the Shadow Stealer. And its origins will make you wonder if some beings were never meant to exist at all. The previous chapter, we left the Azoth Kingdom in ruins. Its final legacy, a clockwork princess whose soul heart still beats with the echo of a lost child. That story was one of creation born from grief, a miracle of metal and memory. But there is another kind of miracle, one that does not build from light and gears. It is the miracle of the unseen, the presence that exists only as a gap in the brightness. Tonight we descend into that gap. We speak of Marshadow, the Shadow Stealer, and the most haunting paradox in all of Pokémon mythology. A warrior that exists only in the shadows of others. Consider for a moment what it means to be a fighting type Pokémon. The type is defined by assertion, by direct confrontation, by the physical assertion of will. A fighter must step into the light, plant its feet and strike. Now consider the ghost type. Ghosts are the opposite. Intangible, elusive creatures of the corner of the eye. They do not fight, they haunt. How then can one creature be both? The answer lies in the very nature of shadow. A shadow has no independent existence. It is a relation, a trace, a negative space shaped by whatever blocks the light. Marshadow is not a fighter that became a ghost. It is a fighter that never learned to stand in the sun. Its power is derivative, a reflection of others' strength. And yet, because it lives in the shadow, it can absorb the techniques, the movements, the fighting spirit of any Pokémon it observes. It becomes a perfect mimic, a living memory of battle. This is not a contradiction. It is the deepest truth of the fighting ghost fusion. You can master combat without ever claiming credit for a single blow. You can win every fight you never start. But where did such a creature come from? The real-world myth that breathes life into Marshadow comes from the Hawaiian Islands, from a legend that chills the bone, even under tropical sun. The old stories speak of the Night Marchers, a ghostly procession of ancient Hawaiian warriors. These are not gentle spirits. They are the restless dead, kings and chiefs, and soldiers who march in the darkness between sunset and sunrise. To hear their war drums, to see the glow of their torches, means death for any living person foolish enough to stand in their path, or even to meet their eyes. Marshadow draws directly from this folklore. It is a solitary marcher, a shadow that moves with the silent purpose of a warrior spirit. But unlike the Night Marchers, Marshadow does not march to collect souls. It marches to observe, to learn, absorb the energy of every battle it witnesses. It is a witness from the dark, and that is where its role in the grand hierarchy of legendary and mythical Pokémon becomes clear. In the lore of the Johto region, there is a story that ties together the three legendary beasts, the rainbow-winged Ho-Oh and a certain shadow. After the burning of the brass tower, Ho-Oh resurrected the three Pokémon who perished in the fire, transforming them into Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. But the legend does not end there. The old texts, the ones that speak of the rainbow wing and the sacred ash, also hint at a fourth figure, a guide who travels through the shadows to lead the way back to the rainbow. That figure is Marshadow. It is called the guide to the rainbow wing. Why would a creature of darkness guide seekers toward light? Because shadows point toward the sun. The longer and darker the shadow, the clearer the direction of the source. Marshadow does not hoard the rainbow. It shows others the path to it. Its existence is a paradox of service, a warrior that never fights, a ghost that leads toward life, a shadow that teaches you to find the light. We know so little of Marshadow's true history because it never leaves a trace. It appears only in the periphery of great events. Some researchers believe it has been present at every major turning point in Pokémon history, hiding in the shadows of legendaries, absorbing their power, and then vanishing before anyone could turn to look. It is the ultimate stealth predator, not of prey, but of knowledge. Every battle Marshadow witnesses becomes part of its being. Every move, every feint, every flash of aura is catalogued in a memory that spans centuries. Perhaps it stood in the shadow of Mew when the first DNA was woven. Perhaps it watched Arceus shape the universe from the darkness that preceded light. We cannot prove it. That is the nature of shadows. They are hardest to see when the light is brightest, and yet Marshadow is not malevolent. The night marches of Hawaiian legend bring death, but Marshadow brings only a strange, silent companionship. In the Alola region, where the folklore of the night marchers is strongest, there are stories of trainers who felt a presence in their shadow during times of great need. They turned, saw nothing, and then felt a surge of strength, the borrowed fighting spirit of a shadow warrior who had seen countless battles. It is as if Marshadow, the consummate outsider, reaches out from the dark to offer its quiet support. It cannot step into the light to fight beside you, but it can pour its collected power into your shadow, turning your own fighting spirit into something greater than you could achieve alone. This is the deepest mystery of Marshadow. It is a creature defined by what it lacks. It has no permanent form of its own. It is always borrowing, always reflecting, always existing in relation to something else. And yet in that emptiness, it finds purpose. It is the guide, the silent teacher, the ghost that never haunts, but instead illuminates the way forward. To understand Marshadow is to understand that sometimes the most powerful presence is the one you never see, the shadow that lets the light do its work. Now, as we let this shadow recede into the darkness where it belongs, our journey through the mythical realm continues. The next spirit waiting for us does not hide. It announces itself with a crack of thunder and the flash of claws that tear through the sky. It is a creature of pure electricity and feline grace, being that runs so fast it leaves only a trail of static in its wake. That story, chapter 19, is titled Zeraora and the Thunderclap, and it will shake the ground you stand on. But there is a different kind of shadow that falls over Alola, not a shade cast by a hidden fighter, but a flash of blue lightning so fast it leaves an afterimage, burned into the retinas of those who claim to have seen it. And unlike Marshadow, which thrives in darkness, this creature emerges only when the storm is at its peak, silent guardian of a city that hums with human ingenuity. This is the story of Zeraora, the Thunderclap Pokémon, and the mystery of a lightning that seems to come from nowhere. The first question any researcher must confront is the most obvious one. Where does Zeraora's electricity come from? Nearly every electric-type Pokémon possesses some internal organ dedicated to generating bioelectricity, a specialized gland, a set of modified muscles, or even a unique organ like the electric sacs of a Pikachu. These biological batteries convert chemical energy into electrical current, allowing the creature to shock, paralyze, and power its attacks. But Zeraora does not have such an organ. Its anatomy, as far as any scan or autopsy has ever revealed, contains nothing that could generate electricity from within. And yet, when Zeraora moves, it leaves trails of crackling, brilliant blue lightning, a color that speaks of temperatures far higher than the yellow sparks of a Raichu or the pale arcs of a Jolteon. So how does it produce that lightning? The answer lies not in internal generation, but in absorption. Zeraora is a living capacitor, a creature that passively draws in ambient electricity from the world around it. Every lightning strike, every power line, every spark of static in the dry Alolan air. Zeraora drinks it all in, storing it within the incredible conductive properties of its fur. Its pelt is not merely for show. It is a natural superconductor, capable of holding immense charges without releasing them until the moment is right. When Zeraora attacks, it does not create lightning from nothing. It releases lightning that it has been collecting for weeks, months, perhaps even years. The blue color comes from the extreme energy density of that stored charge, a phenomenon known to physicists as a superheated arc. It is not generating electricity, it is unleashing an accumulated storm, but that ability to store and release is only half the puzzle. Zeraora is also famous for something far stranger. It can run through the air. In battle, it appears to leap with impossible grace, bounding across empty space, as if there were invisible platforms beneath its paws. This is not simply a powerful jump. Zeraora uses its stored electromagnetic field to repel itself against the Earth's own magnetic lines of force. By generating a powerful magnetic field of its own, it creates a repulsive push against the planet's geomagnetic field, a form of magnetic levitation. It does not fly in the conventional sense of wings or propulsion. It hovers, skims, and darts by manipulating the very magnetic fabric of the world. In essence, Zeraora does not run on air. It runs on invisible rails of magnetic flux, a technique that allows it to move at speeds that would tear any normal Pokémon apart. This unique ability draws a direct line to the ancient Japanese folklore of the Raiju, the Thunder Beast. In the old stories, the Raiju was a creature of lightning that accompanied the god Raijin, often taking the form of a blue-white ball of light, or a small animal that could fly through storms. The Raiju was said to be made of pure electricity, capable of floating and moving without legs, and it was especially drawn to human structures tall enough to attract lightning. Towers, temples, and the roofs of castles. Zeraora, with its affinity for flying through magnetic fields, and its attraction to the tall spires of Fuula City, is a direct descendant of that myth. The Thunder Beast of old has been reborn as a Pokémon, but it retains the same elusive, storm-born nature, and that brings us to Fuula City itself. This technologically advanced metropolis, built on an artificial island in the Alola region, is famous for its gleaming towers, its massive wind turbines, and its complex power grid that draws energy from the sun and the sea. The city was designed to be self-sufficient, a marvel of human engineering. Yet the people of Fuula City have long whispered about a protector who moves unseen, a guardian that appears only when the city's power systems are in danger of collapsing. That guardian is Zeraora. It is not a creature that seeks out human company. It is drawn to the electromagnetic fields generated by the city's infrastructure, the tall turbines, the high-voltage cables, the constant hum of electricity. These are the signals that call Zeraora from the wild. When a storm threatens the grid, when a surge overloads a substation, Zeraora appears, absorbing the excess energy before it can cause a blackout, then vanishing as silently as it came. This relationship between man and mythical is not one of domestication, but of symbiosis. Zeraora needs the electricity that human technology produces. Without it, its reserves would run dry, and Fuula City needs Zeraora to prevent catastrophic failures. Yet the creature remains elusive, almost cryptozoological in its secrecy. Scientists have tried to track it using electromagnetic sensors, but its own field interferes with their instruments. Photographs are blurry, eyewitness accounts are contradictory, and the only concrete evidence of its existence is the occasional, unexplained stabilization of the city's power statistics. Zeraora is the spirit of the city's electrical grid, a myth made real by the very technology that hums beneath our feet. It is a strange thought. We often imagine mythical Pokémon as ancient primal forces tied to nature, untouched by human hands. But Zeraora is a creature of the modern world. It feeds on our creations, patrols our cities, and flies along our magnetic fields. It is a living reminder that even in our most advanced inventions, there is room for mystery, for wonder, for a flash of blue lightning that comes from nowhere and returns to nothing. And as we consider the strange bond between living energy and the metal that carries it, we begin to wonder about other forms of life that might arise from human industry. What if the very substance of technology, metal itself, could stir into motion, melting and flowing with a will of its own? What if a creature could be born not from flesh, but from liquid metal, shaped by a power that we do not yet understand? That is a mystery that waits in the shadows, and the answer may be stranger than anything we have seen so far. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The previous chapter left us with the mystery of Zeraora, a creature of blue lightning that generates no electricity of its own, riding magnetic fields like a phantom of the storm. And while the thunder beast of Japanese folklore might explain its inspiration, it left a lingering question. What other strange forces are at work in the Pokémon world? Hidden in plain sight, tonight we turn our gaze to something far smaller, far quieter, yet perhaps more alien than any creature we have discussed so far. A being of liquid metal, a hive mind made manifest, and the first mythical Pokémon ever to debut not in a main series game, but on a mobile screen. You may have seen it first in Pokémon Go, a tiny hexnut with a single silver eye wobbling through your phone's augmented reality. But that humble appearance hides a truth stranger than any urban legend. Meltan is not just a Pokémon, it is an invasive species, and its arrival in the modern Pokémon world may signal a long-dormant force awakening from the Earth's own memory. To understand Meltan, we must first understand what it means to be an invasive species. In biology, an invasive organism is one that arrives in a new environment, reproduces rapidly, and disrupts the existing balance. That is exactly what Meltan does. It consumes metal, absorbing the iron, copper, and alloys around it to grow, and because it can reproduce by fission, splitting into new Meltan, a single specimen can become a swarm in days. Trainers in the Kanto region, especially those who ventured into wild areas near abandoned factories and power plants, reported seeing clusters of these tiny metal creatures where none had been recorded before. They seemed to appear from nowhere, as if the earth itself had coughed them up. But where did they come from? The official records state that Meltan was first discovered in the world of Pokémon Go, a mobile game that bridges our reality with the fictional one. This makes Meltan unique among all mythical Pokémon. It was born from the intersection of digital and physical space, a creature designed to be found by exploring the real world. Yet within the lore of the main games, its origin is far more ancient. Ancient texts, carved into stone in a forgotten language, speak of a metal child that slept beneath the mountains for millennia. That child we now believe is Meltan, or rather the collective intelligence of an entire species. Here is where the hive mind biology becomes truly unsettling. Meltan does not have a single brain. Instead, each individual Meltan contains a small portion of a shared consciousness. They communicate through subtle magnetic pulses and by physically linking their hexnut bodies together. When enough Meltan gather, they can form temporary structures, bridges, ladders, even crude shapes. But the most astonishing transformation comes when they merge into a single colossal being, Melmetal. The evolution is not a simple growth, it is a fusion. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of Meltan melt together, their liquid metal bodies flowing into one massive form. The resulting Melmetal stands over 8 feet tall, with arms of twisted cable that can generate immense force. Its core, still visible, glows with the combined energy of the swarm. This process echoes something deep in the history of the Pokémon world. The connection between Meltan and the ancient Iron Age is not just poetic, it is literal. Geologists and Pokémon researchers have found trace amounts of an unknown metal alloy in artifacts from the earliest known civilizations. That alloy, when analysed, matches the composition of Meltan's own body. It suggests that Meltan, or its ancestors, were present when humans first learned to smelt ore, when the first Pokeballs were hammered from crude iron. Some theorists believe Meltan may have been the original source of the special metal used to create the earliest capture devices. If true, then every Pokeball we use today carries a faint echo of the liquid metal mystery. Yet the most chilling part of Meltan's story is its status as an invasive species. In the lore of the Let's Go games, Meltan is explicitly described as a Pokemon that appeared from a different world, one that should not exist in this world. It is considered a threat to native ecosystems because it consumes metal faster than any natural process can replace it. Entire industrial sites have been stripped clean by a single swarm, and because Meltan can reproduce even from a fragment of its liquid metal body, containing an outbreak is nearly impossible. The Pokémon League has classified it as a Class 1 ecological hazard, the same category reserved for creatures like Guzzlord that can devastate entire regions. But why now? Why did Meltan awaken after centuries of dormancy? Some believe the answer lies in the increased electromagnetic activity generated by modern technology. Cell towers, power lines, and wireless networks produce a constant hum of energy that may have stirred the metal child from its slumber. Others point to the appearance of ultra wormholes in recent years, suggesting that Meltan may not be native to our dimension at all. Its hive mind, its liquid metal body, and its ability to phase through solid matter. These traits align more with a creature from ultraspace than one born on Earth. Perhaps it is not an invasive species from another land, but from another universe. What we do know is that Meltan remains one of the most enigmatic mythicals. It is the first to be discovered through a mobile game, the first to be classified as an invasive threat, and one of the few that can change its form by merging with others of its kind. Its liquid metal is not just a substance, it is a living memory, carrying the shape of everything it has ever consumed. Every nail, every gear, every rusted iron beam that a Meltan has devoured becomes part of its collective self. In a way, Meltan is a living archive of the Iron Age, a recorder of humanity's technological infancy. But if you think a colony of liquid metal that can fuse into a giant is strange, wait until you hear about a Pokemon that rules the jungle with an iron fist, bound by an ancient law that no trainer can break. That story awaits in the next chapter. We close the last chapter with Meltan, that strange little hexnut from another world, a creature that defied the usual rules of mythical rarity by appearing en masse, a swarm of living metal. But now, we trade the cold gleam of liquid steel for the humid, tangled depths of a dense jungle, a place where the canopy blocks out the sky and every shadow might be watching. Here the mythical does not hide alone at the top of a mountain or wait in a distant dimension. Here it travels in a troop, and that troop has a lore. Zarude, the rogue monkey Pokemon, a name that already tells you something is off. In most Pokemon lore, a mythical is a singular being, a god or a guardian that exists apart from the ordinary world. Mew was a lone ancestor. Celebi lives in its own pocket of time. But Zarude challenges that entire idea from the moment you meet it, because Zarude is not a solitary deity of the forest. It is a member of a community. It has a leader, a social structure, a hierarchy that governs every branch and every berry, and the one who enforces that law is called the Dada Zarude. Now picture the jungle as a society. The Dada Zarude is not just the strongest or the fastest. It is the one who carries the wisdom of the troop, the one who decides where the vines grow, when to move, and how to protect the sacred territory. The rest of the Zarude follow, each one knowing its place in the order. But there is always a rogue, a Zarude that does not fit, a Zarude that questions the Dada's rule or breaks the jungle law, and that is where our story truly begins. The jungle law itself is not written in any book. It is etched into the very biology of the Zarude and the land they inhabit. At the heart of this law is the Great Tree, a colossal ancient tree that stands at the center of the troop's territory. Its roots run deep, its branches reach high, and wrapped around every limb are the healing vines. These vines are not just strands of plant matter. They pulse with a strange energy, a life force that can mend wounds, cure sickness, and even restore the colour to a faded leaf. The Zarude have learned to use these vines for themselves, to heal their own injuries, and to strengthen their bond with the great tree. But the relationship is not one-sided. The great tree depends on the Zarude for protection. Without the troop, the vines would be stripped by other Pokémon, the tree would weaken, and the jungle would fall silent. It is a symbiosis, a pact of mutual survival. The Zarude protect the tree, and the tree gives them its healing gifts. And the Dada Zarude is the one who ensures that pact is never broken. Now, here is the part that makes Zarude so strange in the context of mythical Pokémon, because the very idea of a social hierarchy, a troop, a law, suggests that Zarude is not a singular miracle. It is a species, a population of individuals that can be born, can grow, can learn. And that means the line between mythical and ordinary Pokémon becomes blurry. Is a Zarude still a mythical if there are dozens of them living in the same jungle? If they can be raised from an egg? If they have a culture passed down from one Dada to the next? The answer, at least in the official records, is yes. Because rarity is not the only measure of a mythical. There is also the mystery, the ancient origin, the connection to something older than the world as we know it. The Zarude troop traces its lineage back to the very first Zarude, the one who discovered the great tree, and learned to weave the healing vines into the fabric of their daily life. That first Dada is the archetype, the mythic ancestor. Every Zarude since is a living echo of that original lawgiver. So when you think about the rogue monkey, you have to consider what it means to break the law. A rogue Zarude is not just a troublemaker. It is a challenge to the entire system. It forces the troop to question their own traditions. And in that way, the rogue becomes a necessary force for change, even as it is cast out. The jungle law is not static. It bends and grows like the vines themselves. And all of this happens in the shadows of the great tree, where the healing vines glow softly at night, where the Dada Zarude watches from the highest branch, and where the next rogue is already stirring. But not every mystery in the Pokémon world is wrapped in leaves and vines. Some are far more insidious, hidden behind a mask of fruit and a poisoned smile. There is a story about a puppet master, one who uses a special kind of berry to bend the will of others. A creature that was once a loyal servant, but became something far darker. That is the tale of Pecharunt and the poisoned puppet master. And we will uncover that strange, twisted history very soon. We left Zarude in the dense jungles of Galar, a rogue monkey bound by the law of the pack. Its healing vines a fragile thread between survival and symbiosis. But not all Pokémon wield their power with such rooted purpose. Some are more insidious, their kindness a mask for something far darker. Tonight, we turn to a mythical Pokémon that rewrites one of Japan's most beloved folktales into a story of poison, puppetry, and the chilling illusion of generosity. This is Pecharunt, the poisoned puppet master. You know the Momotaro legend, the story of the Peach Boy who emerges from a giant fruit and journeys with a monkey, a dog, and a pheasant to defeat a band of Oni. It is a tale of courage, friendship, and triumph over evil. But what if the peach was not a gift, but a trap? What if the companions were not willing allies, but prisoners bound by something far more sinister than a warrior's vow? That is the version of Momotaro that Kitakami whispers about in the shadows of its mountain shrines. Pecharunt is that poisoned peach. Its body is small, round, and coloured in shades of purple and peach, with a tiny crown-like ornament on its head. It looks almost cute, almost harmless, but its power lies in a substance called binding mochi, a sticky rice cake infused with its own toxic energy. When consumed, this mochi does not nourish the body. It entangles the will. It wraps around the mind like silk thread, and the one who eats it becomes a puppet dancing on Pecharunt's strings. This is not a story of a hero gathering allies. This is the story of a master who collects slaves, and the three creatures that follow Pecharunt. The so-called Loyal Three of Kitakami are its most famous victims. Their names are Okidogi, Munkidori, and Fezandipiti. They are the monkey, the dog, and the pheasant from the old legend, but twisted into something grotesque. Okidogi the dog is a bulky venomous canine whose bite carries a poison stronger than any mochi. Munkidori, the monkey, is a sleek purple-furred trickster with psychic abilities that can bend perception itself. Fezandipiti, the pheasant, is almost beautiful, with glistening feathers that shimmer like jewels, but its beauty is a lure. All three are said to have once been ordinary Pokémon, until they ate Pecharunt's binding mochi and became its loyal servants. Loyal not out of love, but out of total, forced devotion. The connection between Pecharunt and the loyal three is not a friendship, it is a parasitic bond. In Kitakami folklore, there is a story about a peach that washed ashore, and three brave Pokémon who tried to protect the village from a terrible threat. But the truth, as uncovered by recent research and the events of the latest generation of games, is far more disturbing. Pecharunt did not wash ashore by accident. It came to Kitakami deliberately, seeking control. It offered the mochi as a gift. And when the three Pokémon accepted, they became its prisoners. They did not protect the village. They terrorized it, acting as Pecharunt's enforcers, its hands and claws and fangs, unable to resist its commands. And here is the deepest horror. Pecharunt does not believe it is evil. Its mind is so twisted that it sees its control as a form of kindness. In its own perception, it gives the loyal three a purpose, a family, a sense of belonging. It provides them with its mochi again and again, not as a punishment, but as a reward. It does not understand that the mochi is the chain. It does not recognize that its love is poison. And that is perhaps the most chilling part of all. When a monster believes it is doing good, there is no reasoning with it. There is no escape. The binding mochi, in a way, is a mirror. It reflects what the consumer desires most. For Okidogi, it might be strength. For Munkidori, cunning. For Fezandipiti, admiration. They get what they want, but only as long as they stay bound. And the cost is their freedom. This is psychological control, perfected into a biochemical trap. Pecharunt does not need to fight. It only needs to offer what you want, and then pull the strings. So we are left with a mythical Pokémon that is not a creator, not a destroyer, not a guardian of balance. Pecharunt is a slave owner, wrapped in the disguise of a child's fairy tale. It is the peach that promises sweetness, but delivers poison. The friend whose handshake is a leash. And if you think the folklore-inspired nightmares end here, wait until we meet a Pokémon with a second mouth hidden in the back of its skull, and a snow woman whose kiss freezes the blood. The yokai that haunt Japan's winter nights and tangled forests are about to step into the light. But that is a story for another chapter. The last chapter left us in the shadow of a poisoned puppet master, a retelling of the ancient Momotaro legend that twisted the story of a boy, born from a peach into something far more sinister. Pecharunt, with its binding mochi and its enslaved loyal three, showed us just how deeply Japanese folklore runs in the veins of Pokemon's most mysterious creatures. But Pecharunt is far from the only one. Tonight, we step into the darker corners of that folklore, where the masks we wear hide something far more ancient and far more hungry. There is a reason why some Pokemon feel like they belong in a nightmare, even when their eyes are wide and innocent. Game Freak has a strange talent for plucking creatures straight from the most unsettling yokai tales and sanding down their edges just enough to fit inside a Pokeball. But if you look closely, if you know where to search, the terror is still there, lurking just beneath the surface. And no two Pokémon illustrate this better than a pair from Generation 3. One with a jaw that should not exist, and another whose very design sparked decades of controversy. Let us begin with Mawile. On the surface, it is a small, playful-looking Pokémon, almost childish in its proportions. It has a wide smile, a tuft of hair, and a pair of what appear to be massive steel horns. But those are not horns. That is a second mouth. A second set of jaws, hinged at the back of its skull, capable of crushing steel and bone alike. This is not a random design choice. Mawile is a direct translation of the Futakuchi-onna, a yokai from Japanese folklore that appears as an ordinary woman at first glance, till she lets her hair down and a second mouth, ravenous and insatiable, splits open at the back of her head. The legend of the Futakuchi-onna is a chilling one. It often involves a woman married to a stingy or cruel husband who never fed her enough. In one version, the woman was cursed by a spirit after she refused to share her food. The second mouth would appear, hidden beneath her hair, and would whisper demands for food, sometimes speaking in voices that were not her own. The mouth would eat constantly, draining her own strength until the woman herself became a hollow shell. Mawile takes that concept and turns it into a competitive battler. Its ability, huge power, makes that hidden jaw devastating in combat. But the lore stays true. Mawile is a deceiver, a trap. It lures you in with a cute face, and then it bites down. Notice how Game Freak sanitized the horror. The Futakuchi-onna is a tragedy, a story about hunger, control, and the monstrous transformation of someone who was once human. Mawile, by contrast, is simply a steel and fairy type. The second mouth is no longer a curse born from neglect. It is just a biological quirk, something that gives it an edge in battle, and yet the uncanny feeling remains. The way Mawile's front face is always smiling, always locked in that expression, while the back mouth opens and closes with a mind of its own. It is a creature that never stops being slightly wrong. Now let us turn to Jynx. Few Pokemon have generated as much debate, as much confusion, and as much uncomfortable silence as this ice and psychic type from the Kanto region. Its design has been scrutinized, altered, and defended for decades, but its origins are not in modern caricature. They are in the Yama-Uba, a figure from Japanese mountain folklore. Yama-Uba is the mountain witch. She is old, she is wild, and she lives deep in the forests, sometimes helping travelers, sometimes devouring them. She is a liminal figure, neither fully good nor fully evil. In some stories, she is a wise crone who grants blessings. In others, she is a cannibalistic demon. She is often depicted with long, unkempt white hair, a tattered kimono, and a mouth that stretches into a wide, unsettling smile. Sound familiar? Jynx, as originally designed in the earliest games, had black skin, massive pink lips, and a long, flowing white dress. The resemblance to the Yama-Uba was unmistakable, but the Western audience saw something else entirely. The combination of dark skin and exaggerated lips evoked deeply offensive racial stereotypes, and the controversy forced Game Freak to alter Jynx's colour palette in later releases, changing its skin to a purple hue. And yet, the Yama-Uba connection was never officially stated. It was buried. The lore for Jynx in the Pokédex is vague. It speaks in a language no one understands, it dances strangely, and it can charm others with its mysterious rhythms. The ambiguity is a sanitizing curtain. The raw old witch of the mountains terror is gone, replaced by a sassy, flirtatious humanoid Pokemon. But if you know the Yama-Uba, if you have read the stories of women living alone in the mountain passes, eating lost children and weaving their hair into ropes, then Jynx becomes something else entirely. It becomes a ghost story that was never fully erased. This is the pattern. Game Freak takes a nightmare, files down the teeth, and hands it to children. The Futakuchi-onna becomes a cute steel trap. The Yama-Uba becomes a disco-dancing pop star. But the teeth are still there. They are just hidden, and that is what makes these Pokemon so fascinating. They are the uncanny valley made flesh. They remind us that folklore does not die when it is adapted. It just changes shape. Mawile and Jynx are proof that the yokai never left. They simply learned to smile. And when you look at Mawile's front mouth, frozen in its permanent grin, while the back jaw grinds away in the dark, you realize that the smile is the most dangerous part of all. The same kind of horror hides in other evolutionary lines, just waiting for you to notice the shadows that cling to them. Next, we will follow the lantern light into a family of ghosts that started with a single bell and ended with a one-eyed monster that guards the boundary between life and death. The spirits are not done with us yet. From the chilling folklore of the two-mouthed woman and the mountain witch, We now turn to a different kind of ghost story that walks the line between the flickering flame of a wandering soul and the hollow gaze of a paper lantern. The evolutionary line of Duskull, Dusklops and Dusknoir is not just a progression of stats and abilities. It is a journey through the very concept of death itself, translated from Japanese folklore into Pokémon form. Think of Duskull first. It is small, it floats, it wears that single red eye like a beacon in the night. In its original design, there is a clear echo of the Hitardama, the will-o'-the-wisp, the ghostly flame that marks a soul recently departed from the body. In traditional Japanese belief, Hitardama are often seen drifting near graveyards or places of death, glowing pale blue or orange, leading the living astray, or simply marking where a spirit lingers. Duskull embodies that moment of transition, the spark of consciousness that has not yet moved on. It is death in its most fragile, almost innocent form. But then Duskull evolves into Dusklops, and the shape changes. The body becomes a mummy-like torso, wrapped in bandages, and now there is only one massive eye staring from the center of a dark, hollow face. This is no longer a wandering flame, it is a vessel. Dusklops draws from the Hitasume Kozo, the one-eyed child yokai, but also from the imagery of a sealed container. Its body is said to absorb anything it encounters, and its true form is hidden inside that black void. In folklore, the one-eyed spirit is often a mischievous trickster, but Dusklops feels more like a trap, a pit that has already swallowed countless souls. And then we arrive at Dusknoir, the final evolution, the form that leaves behind the childish flame and the wrapped mummy to become something far more deliberate. Dusknoir's design is unmistakably tied to the Cho-Chin-O-Bake, the haunted paper lantern yokai, the one with the split mouth, the bulging eyes, and the long tongue that lolls out like a tired ghost. But Dusknoir is not a simple paper lantern. It is a lantern that has been given purpose. Look at its head. The single eye now glows with an eerie intelligence, and that mouth, that long, almost comical tongue, is not for tasting, it is for collection. This is where the lore takes a turn into the deeply unsettling. According to Pokédex entries across multiple generations, Dusknoir is said to receive orders from the spirit world, and those orders come through the antenna on top of its head. That antenna is not decoration, it is a receiver, a radio tuned to frequencies that no living creature can hear. Dusknoir listens to the commands of the dead, and it acts accordingly. It moves through the human world as an agent of the afterlife, guided by whispers from beyond. But what does it do with those orders? The official lore says that Dusknoir eats souls. It opens its mouth and draws in the spirits of the lost, swallowing them into its body. Yet there is a more troubling theory, one that surfaces when you read between the lines. What if Dusknoir does not eat at all? What if it merely transports? The antenna receives a signal, the mouth opens, and a soul passes through Dusknoir's body to somewhere else, to a destination we cannot see. The ghost is not a predator, it is a conduit, a doorway that moves from place to place, collecting the dead and delivering them to the other side. The eating is a metaphor. The real process is something far more mechanical, far less merciful. Consider what that means for the ghost that wears a lantern for a head. The Cho-Chin-O-Bake in folklore is a playful, sometimes frightening spirit, but it is ultimately a tool given accidental life. Dusknoir, by contrast, was never a tool that gained life. It was always a tool. It was crafted by death itself to serve a function. Its evolution from Duskull to Dusklops to Dusknoir is the evolution of death from a simple transient spark to a professional, efficient system. The Hitardama becomes the Cho-Chin-O-Bake, and the Cho-Chin-O-Bake becomes a radio receiver for the underworld. This line of Pokémon forces us to ask a question that many ghost stories avoid. What happens after the soul is taken? Most tales end with the spirit being captured or consumed, but Dusknoir implies that the process continues, that the soul is not destroyed, it is delivered, and someone, or something, is giving orders from a place we cannot see. That same cosmic sense of unseen powers and hidden balances will echo in our next story, where the night sky itself becomes a canvas for a deity shaped like a bat, a goddess of stars and obsidian, whose wings carry the weight of an ancient Aztec world. But for now, let the image of that antenna linger, a single receiver tuned to a frequency of silence, listening for instructions from the dead. We ended the last chapter with Dusknoir, that spectral sentinel whose antenna listens to the spirit world, receiving orders from some unknown dimension. It is a creature born from Japanese ghost folklore, from lanterns and wandering flames. But tonight, we leave the islands of Japan entirely. We cross an ocean and we travel back in time, not to feudal Kyoto, but to the heart of Mesoamerica. Because not every mythical Pokémon whispers its secrets from a yokai tale. Some of them carry the weight of an entire lost civilization. In the Alola region, under a sky filled with stars that remember a different kind of light, there is a legend of a beast that calls the moon. This is Lunala, and if you have only seen it as the elegant counterpart to Solgaleo, the Lion of the Sun, you have missed the shadow it casts. For Lunala is not just a bat, it is a being of obsidian and blood, of eclipses and endings. It is one of the few Pokémon whose design reaches beyond the familiar folklore of Japan and taps directly into the mythology of the Aztecs. You see, when the people of ancient Alola spoke of Lunala, they did not speak of a gentle moon guardian. They whispered of the beast that calls the moon, and they feared its arrival. The Alolan people believed that Lunala was a harbinger of the end. Why? Because of what it does with light. Lunala is known in the Pokédex as the Moon Pokémon, but its true title in ancient times was the Light Eater. When it appears, it does not simply glow, it absorbs. It drains the very radiance from the sky, plunging the world into a cold, silent darkness. For the native Alolans, this was not a natural cycle, it was an omen, and this is where the connection to Itzpapalotl begins. Itzpapalotl is an Aztec deity, a fearsome figure whose name means obsidian butterfly. She is often depicted with skeletal wings tipped with sharp obsidian blades, and her domain is the realm of the dead, the underworld known as Mictlan. She is a goddess of sacrifice, of the moon, and of the stars that fall from the sky. Now look at Lunala. Its wings are not like a typical bat's. They are skeletal, stretched thin, with sharp, blade-like edges. Its body is ethereal, almost ghostly, and its connection to the moon is not one of gentle illumination. It is one of devouring. The Aztecs believed that during a lunar eclipse, the moon was being eaten. Some said it was a jaguar, others said it was a celestial serpent. But in the mythology of Itzpapalotl, she too is a devourer. She swallows the stars, she consumes the light. The scientific reality of a lunar eclipse is simple. The earth passes between the sun and the moon, casting its shadow. The moon turns a deep red, the colour of blood. But for the Alolan people, watching Lunala's silhouette cross the face of the moon was like watching the obsidian butterfly unfold her wings. The light did not just fade, it was taken. This is the core of the Light Eater motif. In the games and the lore, Lunala is said to be able to absorb light and convert it into energy. Its signature move, Moongeist Beam, is a ghostly beam of pure lunar energy that ignores abilities. But think about what a Moongeist is. A Geist is a spirit. Moongeist Beam is literally a beam of the moon's spirit, and when Lunala uses it, it is not creating light. It is releasing light that it has already consumed. It is a creature that lives by filling itself with the radiance of the night sky, and the moment it releases that energy, it is a moment of cosmic violence. But why did the Alolans fear it so deeply? Because in their creation stories, the world began in darkness. The first light was a gift from the legendary Pokémon Solgaleo and Lunala, but that light was not eternal. Necrozma, the third being, the Prism Pokémon, once had its own light. It was a being of pure brilliance, but something happened. Necrozma lost its light, became a husk, and began to steal the light of others. And in that story, Lunala is not the innocent moon goddess, it is the gateway. Lunala's ability to absorb light is what allowed Necrozma to drain Alola of its energy, nearly destroying the region. The ancient Alolans remembered that. They knew that when the beast that calls the moon appeared, It was not a time for celebration. It was a time for prayer, for offerings, for hoping that the moon would return. And so we find Lunala standing at a strange crossroads. It is a Pokémon that draws its design from an Aztec bat goddess, a deity of death and obsidian. It embodies the scientific phenomenon of the lunar eclipse, but it twists it into something predatory, and its role in the Alolan mythology is that of a necessary but terrifying force. It is the bringer of the moon, yes, but the moon has always been a symbol of madness, of transformation, of the thin line between life and death. In the Aztec world, its Papalatal was not a goddess you prayed to for blessings. She was a goddess you appeased to avoid destruction. As we move further into the realm of Pokémon that blur the line between myth and nightmare, we find that not all inspirations are ancient. Sometimes the strangest legends are not centuries old. Sometimes they are just decades old, born from a single bizarre encounter in a small American town. That is where we meet a creature that looks like it crawled out of a police report from 1955. A creature with glowing eyes and claws that shine in the dark. But that is a story for our next chapter. For now, let the image of the obsidian butterfly linger. Let the shadow of Lunala's wings cross your mind, because the moon is always watching, and sometimes it eats the light. From the obsidian wings of an Aztec bat goddess, we now descend into the darkness of a Kentucky farmhouse on a humid August night in 1955. The Sutton family, gathered in their rural home near Hopkinsville, had no reason to expect visitors, but something did come. Something small, something twitchy, and something that would later find its way into the annals of both UFO folklore and the creature design archives of a Pokémon developer's notebook. The incident that night became known as the Hopkinsville Goblins encounter. According to the witnesses, a strange craft hovered over a nearby field, and from it emerged figures no more than 3 feet tall. They had long, spindly arms that ended in clawed hands, large glowing eyes that seemed to float in the darkness, and bodies that moved in jerky, almost mechanical bursts. The Suttons and their friend Billy Ray Taylor grabbed rifles and shotguns, firing at the creatures as they approached, but the bullets seemed to pass right through them, or perhaps the creatures dodged with an unnatural fluid speed. One account describes a creature clinging to the side of the house, peering through a window with those luminous eyes, before scurrying up the roof with a series of quick, twitchy movements. The encounter lasted for hours, a siege of terror that left the family shaken and the local police baffled. Decades later, when Game Freak designed a Pokémon for the 3rd generation, they tapped into that exact sense of jerky, unpredictable motion. Sableye is a creature that never stands still. Its animations in the games are a rapid succession of bobbing, darting, and shifting weight from foot to foot. It looks like it is perpetually scanning the darkness for something or someone. That twitchy quality is a direct homage to the way the Hopkinsville goblins were described. Not walking smoothly, but flickering from one spot to another, moving in a way that seemed to defy normal physics. Sableye's body is lean and angular, its limbs long and spindly, just like the reported aliens. And then there are the eyes. Sableye's most defining feature is those 2 massive gemstones that sit in its eye sockets. In the games, they are described as crystals that are formed from the minerals it consumes. But why does it eat gemstones? The Pokédex tells us that Sableye's diet consists primarily of rocks and minerals, and that the gemstones are actually its eyes. This is a biological mystery that echoes a real-world oddity. Certain deep-sea creatures, like the barrel-eye fish, have transparent heads and eyes that can rotate, giving the illusion of glowing orbs. But Sableye takes it a step further. The gem eyes are not just protective lenses. They are the eyes themselves, grown from the very stones it eats. This suggests a kind of symbiotic digestion. The minerals it consumes are transformed into the crystalline structures that allow it to see. In the folklore of the Hopkinsville incident, the creatures were reported to have enormous, glowing eyes that seemed to emit their own light. Witnesses said the eyes were the most terrifying feature because they didn't blink. They just stared, unblinking, from the darkness. Sableye captures that perfectly, but it also adds a layer of predator logic. If your eyes are made of gemstones, you are both hunter and treasure, and that leads us to the darker side of its inspiration. The Hopkinsville goblins are often linked to a much older European creature, the redcap. In Scottish border folklore, the redcap is a type of goblin that inhabits ruined castles and towers. It is small, grotesque, and known for its red cap, which is said to be stained with the blood of its victims. Redcaps are murderous, violent creatures that will attack anyone who trespasses into their domain. They are also incredibly fast and twitchy, moving with bursts of speed as they lunge at intruders. The connection between Sableye and the redcap is subtle but unmistakable. Sableye's dark type gives it an affinity for malice and mischief. Its cry is a high-pitched cackle, and its behaviour in the wild is described as playful but dangerous, like a goblin that enjoys toying with its prey. The name Sableye itself combines sable, a dark fur, or the colour black, but also echoes the sound of sarb, a weapon, and its design, with the pointed ears, the sharp claws, and that ever-present grin, feels like a modern interpretation of the old redcap illustrations. A small, hunched figure with long arms and a face that is both mischievous and malevolent. So when you look at Sableye, you are seeing a creature stitched together from three separate threads. The twitchy, glowing-eyed aliens of Kentucky, the gem-eating mineral adaptation that turns its very sight into a weapon, and the ancient terror of the European goblin that waits in the shadows of a ruined tower. It is a Pokémon that feels ancient and alien at the same time, and in its own way, it reminds us that some of the strangest stories are not born from pure fantasy, but from the whispers of the night, the rumours of a farmhouse, and the legends that refuse to die. That kind of deathless legend, the kind that rises from tragedy and fire, will pull us into our next story, where a burning tower in Yoto gave birth to 3 resurrected guardians, and the lore of a phoenix that may not be what it seems. So the last chapter ended with a creature that arrived from the sky, or at least from a farmer's backyard in Kentucky. And it left us wondering how folklore and alien encounters blur into one shape. But tonight we shift from the stars to fire, and from goblins to gods. Because if you trace the strange history of Pokemon's most mysterious events, you eventually arrive at a place where the ground is still blackened and the air smells of ash and rain. That place is the Brass Tower of Yoto, and what happened there is not just a story of destruction, it is the defining moment of resurrection in the Pokemon world. A moment that gave us 3 of the most iconic legendary beasts, but also left behind more questions than answers about what was lost before the flames. Let's talk about the fire itself. The burned tower, as it is now known, once stood tall as the Brass Tower, a gleaming structure that towered over Ecruteak City. It was said to be a place where Pokemon and humans could meet on equal ground, a sacred space built long before the present day. But one night, lightning struck, or perhaps it was something else. Some accounts whisper that the fire was not an accident, that it was a deliberate act of ritual cleansing. Either way, the tower burned, and inside that blaze, 3 Pokemon perished. They were not the beasts we know today. They were something else entirely, something unnamed, unremarkable and mortal. Now here is the part of the story that the games never fully explain, but which every lore hunter has tried to piece together. What were those 3 original Pokémon? The official lore says only that they were Pokémon that died in the fire. No species, no names, no distinguishing features. In the Pokémon Crystal version, the legendary beasts are described as having been resurrected by Ho-Oh, but the game never shows their original forms. This has led to decades of speculation. One popular theory suggests they were the 3 evolutions of Yoto, Vaporeon, Jolteon and Flareon, because those 3 represent the same elements as Suicune, Raikou and Entei, water, lightning and fire. But the timeline doesn't quite line up, and the evolutions were already known in Kanto before the tower burned. Another theory says they were simply common Pokemon, like Growlithe or Arcanine, transformed into something divine by Ho-Oh's power? The truth is, we do not know, and maybe that is the point. The fire erased not just their lives, but their identities. They were reborn so completely that their past selves became irrelevant. But who performed this resurrection? Ho-Oh, the rainbow-winged Pokémon, often called the Phoenix of the Pokémon world. Its role here is critical, because Ho-Oh does not just revive the dead, it transforms them. In mythologies around the world, the Phoenix is a symbol of renewal, of rising from ashes, but in Johto the Phoenix is also a judge. Ho-Oh is said to only appear to trainers of pure heart, and its resurrection of the three beasts was not an act of mercy alone. It was a proclamation. By raising them, Ho-Oh bound them to the land. They became guardians of Johto, each one embodying a force of nature. But there was a price. They lost their individuality. Their memories of their former lives, if any remained, were burned away. They became symbols, not individuals. And that is the cost of divine resurrection in Pokémon lore. You are made eternal, but you are no longer yourself. You become a walking legend, forever tied to the story of your own death. Now consider the burned tower itself. Why is it still standing? Why has no one rebuilt it? In the games, you can explore the ruins, climb the broken stairs, and stand where the beasts once died. It is treated as a historical landmark, but also as a site of lingering spiritual power. The tower's design suggests ritualistic significance. It was built as a bell tower, but also as a sanctuary. The brass that once covered it would have been valuable, yet it was left to decay. This implies that the people of Ecruteak City regard the tower as sacred, even in ruin. They do not disturb it. They let the grass grow through the cracked floor, and they tell stories to their children about the night. The sky burned, and the phoenix came down. The tower is not just a monument, it is a wound, a place where the boundary between life and death was torn open, and then stitched back together with fire and feathers. But the mystery deepens when you realize that Ho-Oh's resurrection was not the only miracle in Johto. The legendary beasts are not the only beings shaped by that fire. Some lore suggests that Ho-Oh itself was transformed by the event, that it became the rainbow Pokémon only after descending into the flames to save what it could. And then there is the question of the other tower, the Tin Tower, where Ho-Oh is said to roost. That tower was not burned. It stands intact, a mirror to its ruined partner. Why was one spared and the other destroyed? What decision was made that night? The answer may be tied to the idea of sacrifice. The brass tower burned to give birth to the beasts. The Tin Tower remained to house their creator. Together they form a pair of poles, one of death, one of life, and in between, a story that has never been fully written. So when we talk about the legendary beasts, we are really talking about loss, about the things that are erased so that something greater can emerge. The fire did not just kill 3 Pokémon, it created 3 legends, and that creation came at a cost we still do not fully understand. That is the weirdest part of this myth, not the resurrection itself, but the silence around what was lost. The game gives us names and types and stats, but it does not give us the names of the original creatures. It does not show us their faces. We are left to wonder if they were happy before the lightning struck, if they knew they were about to die, if they chose to stay in the tower that night, or if they were trapped. And that unanswered question is what makes the burned tower feel less like a ruin and more like a shrine to the unknown. As we step back from the ashes of Johto, we begin to see a pattern in Pokémon's myths. They are not clean stories with happy endings. They are fractured, incomplete, and haunted by what is not said. And that is exactly what we will explore next. The stories that were left unfinished, the files that were never closed, and the mysteries that still defy explanation. Because the burned tower is only one chapter in a much larger book of unspoken lore. The future of myth is still being written, but the unsolved files hold the clues to what came before. And if we keep digging, we might finally see the faces of the creatures that burned. The story so far has brought us to the ashes of the brass tower, where 3 Pokémon lost their lives in a fire that consumed a kingdom's hope, only to be reborn as legendary beasts beneath the wing of Ho-Oh. That resurrection was not just a tale of flame and feathers. It was a reminder that within the world of Pokémon, death is rarely the final chapter. It is a door, but what lies beyond that door has always been guarded by something even more elusive than a phoenix, something that the franchise itself built into its very DNA from the very beginning. The mythical category is not a curiosity, it is the backbone of the world of wonder. The secret heart that keeps the universe breathing. Without it, Pokémon would be a zoo, a catalogue of creatures you could collect and battle, but never truly revere. The mythicals are the ones you cannot find through honest play. They are the ones that exist in the margins of the code, whispered about in rumours that refuse to die. They force you to believe in something beyond the cartridge, and that is essential for longevity, because a world that is fully mapped is a world that no longer invites exploration. The mythicals are the blank spaces on the map, the islands that no one has ever visited, but everyone swears they have seen from the shore. Now, in the most recent generations, something new has been happening, hidden inside the patches and updates pushed to the latest games. Data miners have found traces of data that should not be there, unreachable entries, placeholder text for Pokémon that have never been announced, moves with no known user, items with no purpose. This is not the usual leftover content from early development. This is deliberate. It feels like the developers are leaving behind breadcrumbs, teasing the existence of creatures that may never officially arrive, or may arrive only when the stars align on a specific Thursday in a country you do not live in. It is the modern equivalent of that truck in Vermilion City. You know the one. Everyone knows the one. But this time, the truck is made of code, and the Mew is a ghost that might never be caught. That is why we still hunt 25 years later. The ghost in the machine has many names. Missing No is the original, the glitch that broke the game and became a legend in its own right. But the ghost is not just a set of garbled pixels. It is the idea that somewhere in the silent assembly of ones and zeros, a secret is hiding. It could be a mythical Pokémon that was cancelled mid-development. It could be a script for an event that was never triggered. It could be nothing more than a programmer's inside joke. But the possibility alone is enough to keep the search alive. We are not hunting for a reward. We are hunting for the feeling that the world is bigger than we thought, that the machine is listening, and that one day the ghost will speak. And when it does, we will be here, waiting, with our save files and our theories and our sleepless nights, because that is what it means to believe in the mythical. It means accepting that some wonders will never be handed to you. They have to be earned through patience, through obsession, through the quiet faith that behind every patch note, every cryptic tweet from a developer, every piece of unused data, there is a story waiting to be told. The future of myth is not in the past. It is in the next update, the next leak, the next moment when a child playing in their bedroom finds something that no one else has ever seen, and the hunt will go on, because the ghost in the machine will never truly be exorcised. It will just change its form and wait. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.